Policemen. What crime was so cool that you didn't want to arrest the criminal? I had a case in my first year as an officer where a drunk man launched his car off a boat ramp. We approximated that he was going about 50 miles per hour, and the car landed in 20 feet of water. Now for the cool part. He swam out, ran 8 miles to his uncle's house, and stole his tow truck. He then drove said truck back, swam down and hooked the tow cable to the axle of the car, and proceeded to pull the tow truck into the water as well. We were called on scene and we could only see the headlights and the tip of the hood above the water. He was passed out asleep on the dock next to it. A friend of mine used to be a dealer, and for some reason he spent his money on reptile habitats. Giant glass enclosures connected by tunnels with plant life everywhere, dozens of different reptiles living in a lush green world. When he got busted, the cops were calling other cops to come take a look. Some of them even went to get cameras. This was in the 90s, by the way. They were just so blown away by what they were seeing. Of course, they still arrested him, but in the cops' eyes, he had become a cool reptile guy instead of just another substance dealer that they were arresting. Oh, this one always gets me. In my city, a homeless man was breaking into homes by lockpicking. Nothing unusual with that. However, what he did was brilliant. He'd wait until he knew the times people wouldn't be home, and he'd clean their homes for them. He averaged a week or so per home going unnoticed. The first few homes he was never caught, but signs of a home invasion were reported to us. On the house he did get caught in, he used the defense that he was cleaning a home that he was hired to clean and mistakenly got the house wrong and the door was, quote, left open. He was armed with nothing but a cell phone. He made fake email correspondence to back his claims from a client with a similar address. He was able to overall, unproven but speculated, stay for upwards of a month in homes. In court, his defense was actually successful in my opinion because the other cases he couldn't be linked to, and he was only prosecuted for the one. Then with his defense, his lawyer only got him 14 days in jail. The guy never took anything outside of food. He'd clean the house, eat, shower, and nap, and then just leave. House cleaning for the price of a pizza? Come on, sign me up for this guy's services. Yeah, I mean, sure, the idea of a homeless man sleeping in my bed is a bit uncomfortable, but if I know that he's using my shower and laundering his own pajamas, and if I think of him as a professional cleaner paid in food and board for his services, maybe I can start to come around to the idea. It's all about how you present your services, folks. My uncle is a cop in Philly. They arrested a guy who one night put up a 20-foot-long, 10-foot-high mosaic mural. Well, Johnson, this has to be the most beautiful F the Police mural written in gigantic male reproductive organs that I've ever seen. Color me impressed. My friend is a police officer in Berlin. He and his colleague were sent to an incident of domestic violence. A guy was beating up his wife and the neighbors called the police. When they arrived at the scene, they found the son of the wife beating up his stepfather, who was trying to fight back, but was just catching one hit after the other. The son made sure not to hit his stepfather's face, and when asked why later, he said, "I didn't want him to go unconscious. I wanted this to last. Also, that would have been unfair as he never hit my mom where other people could see her bruises either." A cool dude police guy stopped me for speeding one Christmas day many years ago. I was late for my night shift at work, so I was in a hurry. When he stopped me, I was thinking, oh crap, I'm a big black guy in a BMW with tinted windows. Surely this looks dodgy as hell. I live in the UK. After apologizing, explaining, and showing him my details, he knew that I was legit and not trying to pull a fast one, so he said, "All right then, follow me." And he put his police car light on and helped me speed through the traffic to be at work on time for a night shift. To this day, I see him around and I buy him a beer in the local pub whenever I can. This will probably get buried. My uncle was a state trooper in Oregon and pulled over a group of downhill skateboarders for speeding in a 40 miles per hour zone. Apparently they were clocked going close to 60 miles per hour down a gradual decline, and apparently they were even passing most of the cars. He didn't write them a ticket because he was just flat out impressed that their massive family jewels didn't slow them down. Pretty legendary. We used to have this campus police officer who'd come chill at a picnic table with us while we smoked the electric lettuce. He said he loved the smell and enjoyed being around us while we were getting goofy. That and we weren't drunks destroying everything in our path like the rest of the students. Come to think of it, my college was liberal as all heck. This was 12 years ago in northeast Pennsylvania. Mary J was essentially legal on my campus, but they really enforced the rules against underage drinking. Makes me think of Harry Redford, also known as Captain Starlight. He was on trial for stealing cattle, but the jury was so impressed with the feat that they found him not guilty. The judge asked the jury to reconsider. The jury came back out and stated, "Not guilty, and he can keep the cattle." The judge was appalled. The government then shut down that district court for 2 years based on the verdict. I'm not a cop, but my dad was. He pulled over the local ice cream truck in my town because the driver failed to stop at the stop sign. While reviewing his papers, he realized the guy's license is expired, and his permits to operate the ice cream truck hadn't been renewed yet that summer. Instead of writing him ticket after ticket and essentially ruining this man's yearly income, he gave him 2 weeks to sort it out. Ice Cream Man got all of his stuff in order, and at the end of the summer dropped off 4 massive boxes of ice cream to our house as a thank you. I've never eaten so many screwballs in my life. My mum once got pulled over by a nice cop around Christmas time for a busted tail light. She was on her way to get it fixed anyway. The officer walked up to her window and told her to pick a hand. She picked one and he gave her a card saying, "Merry Christmas," and left without giving her a ticket or anything. I was a rookie in the early 80s. I was dispatched on a disturbance call, and when I arrived, there was a guy on the ground and a woman was pummeling him with a baseball bat. I ran up and grabbed her, took the bat and handcuffed her. I called an ambulance for the guy, and the woman was crying and saying, "You don't understand. He committed the unspeakable act on me last year." I was a little incredulous, but checked it out, and sure enough, he did have an outstanding warrant for the R word. I had dispatch pull up the report, and you guessed it, she was the victim. The EMTs checked him out, and he was very bruised but not really injured. I took the cuffs off her and slapped them on him, and told her thank you for the assist on the arrest. He went straight to jail, did not pass go, nor collect $200. I'm not a cop, but I've been let go by the cops a number of times when I was a wild youth. First, there were the many times I just walked calmly past the cops busting a house party. They were too busy having fun chasing the kids running or hiding. Another time, I was out joyriding with my friend soon after the 4th of July. We were in a rural area and had some fireworks in the car. We hadn't seen a car for miles, so I had the brilliant idea of Roman candle jousting. I held the candle outside and shot out above and in front of the car, so we'd drive through the sparks. It was great watching all the colorful bursts shower over the windshield. We did 2 candles, and then we decided we'd do 1 more and be done. For that last candle, we passed a dark car on the side of the road for the last round of sparks. Quickly, we realized that the car was following us so fast, so my friend put the pedal down to get away. I think we got up to 70 before the cop lights came on, and we realized we were doomed. We immediately pulled over, of course. In the end, the cops confiscated our fireworks and told us we'd be receiving civil fines in the mail. Those fines never came. Tommy Fitzpatrick. In 1956, he stole a small plane from New Jersey for a bet, and then landed it perfectly on the narrow street in front of the bar that he had been drinking at in Manhattan. 2 years later, he did it again for someone that didn't believe he'd done it the first time. I bet the cops that arrested him were very impressed. Heck, he didn't even end up getting that much of a punishment for either crime. The first time ended up being only $100 fine, since the charges were dropped by the owner of the plane, and the second resulted in only 6 months of jail time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was pulled over for speeding on my bike once. They seemed quite impressed by my pace when they saw the old bike I was riding on and just gestured me to leave without even stopping. I think how cool or rad this one is rests on whether it was an old motorbike or an old bicycle. Except, can you be arrested for speeding on the latter? I think even if you could, they'd probably just want to pull you over to see how you were doing that. Cool story anyway. Next up, a mega one. In short, tale of an old boyfriend's misspent youth, sticking it to the man and in the process gaining the grudging respect and admiration of the baconator who busted him. I have a cool story about an ex-boyfriend and his crazy cop and criminal camaraderie. He was brilliant but kinda messed up. When he was in his early 20s, he got into crystal, and thar she blew. He ended up homeless, dumpster diving for food and sellable items or whatever else he could get his hands on. One day, he found a set of lockpicks in a little leather case. He immediately hit up the library, and through books and the library's free computers and internet, he set about teaching himself to pick locks. The thing about crystal is, it makes you incredibly single-minded. But this guy was also the type where, if he became interested in something, then he dove deep into full-on obsession. He started spending all of his time with locks. Then he started making keys. I don't know how many of you have had experience hanging around in substance dens, but he was the guy in the corner bent over a Dremel for 2 days straight. Soon, no lock could keep him out. Still, he had his morals somewhat intact at this point, so armed with his new skill, he just decided to go after parking meters. He figured that because said parking was instituted in World War II to pay for the war effort, then never taken offline as promised by the various state powers, he was stealing from the man. He soon branched out to vending machines and coin-operated laundry machines too, though that was later. He'd somehow steal a parking meter, either by bashing it over with a crappy car, then tossing it into the trunk and speeding off, or painstakingly hacksawing the metal pole. Some meters were just locked to the pole, so he'd just pick that lock and make off with the head. He'd then abscond with his prize to a secluded location, usually a flophouse, and set about copying the keyway. Because the meters in our town at the time only had 3 or 4 master keys, he soon had a homemade key to every meter in the city. It was then as simple as rolling up to each meter on a street, opening it, pulling out the cup of change, dumping it into a heavy-duty duffel bag, putting it all back the way he found it and moving on to the next one. He was pulling in $3 to $4 grand every time he went out. He targeted private parking lots too, because to him, they were the worst of the worst. They were also, incidentally, the motherlode because they had larger coins and bills in them. He soon became very popular. He'd pay people to spot or block sightlines and drive him around, and the word got out. He was the man, because when you have several $1,000s every night, you're the life of the party. With this positive attention came the negative, however. One story that comes to mind, there was this up-and-coming substance lord called the Fat Persian. I've changed the nationality for privacy reasons. My ex often scored from this guy. TFP was delighted by the way my ex-boyfriend was Robin Hooding around and sticking it to the man and pulling in fat stacks of money. Dollar signs flashed in TFP's eyes. Or cents, anyway. So, TFP came up with a plan. This particular night finds my ex at a flophouse holding court in the corner with his trusty Dremel. Someone hands him a phone. On the other end is the urgent sotto voice of a girl he knows. A girl who hung out at TFP's place a lot. Get the hell out of there right now. They're on their way for you. You have maybe 5 minutes. Go. Before my ex could ask questions, she had already hung up. He handed back the phone, stuffed his tools into his backpack and quietly deked out the back door, and ran through the backyards to get as far away as possible. 4.8 minutes later, the door was kicked in and men with balaclavas and various weapons stormed the place. It was a multi-level house stuffed with people in various stages of tweak and nod, so it took a while to get everyone on the floor in one room and realized that my ex was nowhere to be found. Where the F is he? We don't know, he was just here minutes ago, man. A full-blown SWAT-style check of the place ensues. With their plan foiled, my ex-boyfriend's would-be kidnappers and assailants broke some stuff, hit a few terrified bystanders, and then just left. The plan was to abscond with the brain, take him to some dank basement, handcuff him to a radiator or what have you, shoot him up with stuff 24/7 and force him to make keys until he could no longer function. And then, who knows? Dispose of him in some grisly fashion, most likely. Later, when confronted, over the phone if I recall correctly, TFP was like, "Come on, buddy. You can't blame a guy for trying, can you?" No hard feelings, huh? I digress. Stuff was getting real wild. Anyway, the cops, the city, and the private parking companies were also doing the math and realizing that somebody was ferreting into their cash receptacles and getting away scot-free. After numerous arrests, near misses, and run-ins, the Baconators knew who their guy was. It was just a matter of catching him red-handed. The owner of one of the main monopolist private parking companies began staking out his own properties. He parked in his lots overnight every night for a month, waiting and watching. He always managed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, though. He'd be in one lot while my ex was in another across town monkeying around with his stuff, and so on and so forth. Finally, parking dude caught and apprehended my ex with his hand in the change jar, called the cops and crowed with delight. And then he probably slept the best sleep of his life, or at least since my ex began his reign of terror. The parking dude couldn't deny the ingenuity and straight-up wiliness displayed by my ex, though, and had to hand it to the guy. Same with the cops. One cop in particular, the guy that my ex had the most dealings with, was also gleefully flabbergasted by the pair on this kid. In the interrogation room, you'd have sworn the two were old buddies laughing over beers, reminiscing about the good old days. "So, that night we were chasing you and you disappeared, where the frick did you go? We were totally stymied, it's like you teleported away. Oh, you know that bush besides the house on Street and Avenue? I hid in there till you guys left. Oh crap, we must have walked past that damn bush 20 times. Oh yeah, I was doking in my Batman underoos for sure. Oh, check this out. This was the meeting I was at a few weeks ago with the mayor, chief of police, and parking commissioner. The mayor goes, "What are we going to do with this kid with the keys?" The parking commish says, "Well, we've already changed the locks on 30% of the meters." And the police chief pulls out a ring with a bunch of janky homemade keys on it, selects a key and holds it up. "You mean these locks?" Commissioner goes, "Oh, well, we've introduced a new virtually pick-proof lock in a few meters. We've only managed to install it on a few meters, but..." Police chief pulls out another key from the ring and holds it up, eyebrow cocked. Parking commissioner goes, "I see." Police chief selects another 3 keys from the ring and fans them out. "Are you going to tell us about these new unbreachable locks now?" Mayor and parking commissioner go in unison, "Ah, crap. Are you going to get this guy or what?" I mean, it was priceless. We were so teed off. We were all certain the parking commissioner was going to get fired along with the rest of us. Oh man, that's so awesome. They ended up becoming friends, especially after my ex got out of the last long stretch of jail during that time and decided to straighten up. When the ex got out, parking dude tracked him down and hired him as a security consultant. When that gig ended, he hired him on as a meter reader. That job was really too hard for him to do from a moral perspective though. Suddenly he was working for the man, doing his bidding, and the cognitive dissonance was too much. He stayed clean for about 8 years and regularly met up with the cop for beers or coffee, and they always had a ball reminiscing about the good old, bad old days. This was around the time he and I reconnected. We were street urchins together in our early teens, or my early teens and his late ones. He was 4 years older than me. We got together, I cleaned up from my substance of choice, and we had a happy few years before stuff started going sideways. He's not doing all that well these days, but I've managed to stay clean for 5 years as of yesterday. That's another story though. Let's just say things got spectacularly terrible for both of us before they got better. Well, that was certainly an epic story with the promise of a sequel. You can't really hate this guy for his specific crime, to be honest. What a delightful public menace. And only a menace to the people making an absolute racket off the meters. Well, I'm actually the guy that the cop let go. I was flying down a notoriously steep hill on a neighborhood street on my bicycle. I had the wind at my back and a huge smile on my face as I blew through a stop sign near the bottom. But then a cop goes flying by, all lit up with sirens blaring. Runs up the road of ways past full blast. There are clear streets there. Flips everything off and pulls over to wait for me there. Waved me over when I got to him. "Did you just blow through a stop sign up there?" Yeah, sorry man." "Ah, crap, I was looking for a porch or something. Do you know how fast you were going?" "I know how much fun I was having." I tried a goofy smile. 64 miles per hour is nearly triple the speed limit." He shook his head. "That is so reckless." Starts to lecture me on fines, penalties, and insurance. Heck, a judge might even impose jail time. He thinks for a minute and then continues. "You could have killed someone." Pauses a bit, grins almost imperceptibly. My record on that hill is 57. I went from almost peeing myself to relief in a single heartbeat. I got a pretty good run out at the top, and I think the wind was at my back today. "Next time, stop at the intersection." He gets in his car and drives away. I always stop at that intersection, now. When I was 14, I smoked because I was such a cool guy, you know? Figured my mum didn't know because teenagers are just so sneaky. My mum was dating a cop, and on date night, she left and jokingly said, "No smoking in the house." Well, a few hours later, I went to the apartment quad for a smoke, and my mum and police boyfriend came home early. She yells, "Are you smoking?" And I was a little crap bag, so I was like, "Yeah, you said don't do it in the house." Her boyfriend was like, "Well, technically speaking, he has your parental permission to smoke as long as he doesn't do it inside. So I don't even need to do anything." We did eventually have a talk about the dangers of smoking and all that jazz, which totally didn't take because I was eventually detained by campus police at 16 for smoking on campus during school hours. I got 30 hours of community service. Look up the story of the Barefoot Bandit. Basically, a kid who lived in the woods and evaded the FBI for a good long while. He taught himself to fly planes that he stole through trial and error. By error we mean crashing, and I think the FBI ultimately hired him after catching him in Florida after getting there from his home in Washington state. I've seen cops blind-eye me beating up my pursuers using gauntlets and Goonies-esque anti-bully equipment. What the hell? You know, most cops are super chill if you've got a solid reason for doing what you did. Ice cream lady flipped off my kid and another of the neighbor's kids. They told me, so I went and confronted her. Obviously lying, so I egged the crap out of her car while I was talking to her. She called the cops, one of them came and questioned me about it. I told him I egged her crap and why I did it. He just kinda laughed and asked me to rinse off her windshield. Not all cops are jerks, my dudes. My uncle, who's a police officer, told me of these guys trying some insane skateboarding tricks on some private property. They were also smoking green herb. This one guy was trying to land a crazy trick that he didn't really know about. My uncle told him he had 3 chances to do it, and if he did, he'd let them go with a warning. If not, they'd get fined. The guy lands it on his 3rd try, and they all skate away. This wasn't mine, but a few years ago in Philly, there was this gentleman known as the Swiss Cheese Bandit who'd pull up along young women and ask them to tickle his pickle with a piece of Swiss cheese, with his pickle already out, which is what moves this from just a weird thing to a felony. Well, if I recall correctly, he eventually tried this on a group of female Catholic school students, not knowing that the kids in Philly are absolute savages, and so they promptly chased him down and beat the ever-loving crap out of him until the cops showed up. There were no charges filed against those girls. Good call. I have a story where the cops were raiding a house next to a house party I was at when I was 16. At the house party, people screamed, "Cops!" And I remember walking out with a case of beer and seeing the cops and trying to be sneaky by putting down the beer and walking away. But then within a second, one of the cops yells at me, "Hey kid, you're just gonna leave that case of beer there?" And I'm just dumbfounded like, is this a trick in my head? But I grabbed the case and walked away. I'm assuming the cops had a bigger bust at that house that they were raiding, and they didn't give a crap about a teen with beer. I'm now 25, and looking back, I'm just like, whoa.
Police officers of Reddit, what's the weirdest thing you've caught teenagers or kids doing that is illegal but you found hilarious? I feel like a cop has a story about me and 2 other people. Here it goes. I was 20 at the time and was at an outdoor party with a lot of friends. Late fall, 50 degrees or so, no leaves left on the trees, roughly 50 to 60 people, mostly underage, and we were wasted. My friend's parents lived in a nice part of a bad area and owned an inflatable bounce house business. They had everything set up. A bounce house, sumo suits, massive slides, all sorts of fun stuff. Around 10:30, it's getting loud, and the police show up. Someone yells, "Cops, run!" And everyone starts running. I decide to join the crowd and end up hiding in a bush with 2 other people. Then reality hits. I'm wearing a white hoodie, the guy next to me has a neon yellow hoodie, and the girl had a freaking glow necklace on. The bush? No freaking leaves on it. Right then the cops walk up and starts laughing and asks, "Really guys?" and shines the flashlight directly on us. He instructs us to head back to the driveway with the other captives and gives all of us a pretty hilarious speech. Seriously, we are the Flint Police Department. We have a million things better to do than chase down a bunch of wasted minors. We were just coming by to tell you to keep the noise down. Now we were pouring out all of your drinks and calling your parents. Now we're even. I kinda had a similar experience once when I was young and foolish. A large group of underage kids were at a party one night, and then we decided to go grab some food. I was quite wasted and having difficulty walking on my own, so a couple of friends were holding me up. After a while, a couple of cop cars pulled into the street that we were walking down and all of my friends scrambled. One of the guys holding me up grabs my open bottle of booze out of my hand before running off. So I am left standing on my own in the middle of the street, very obviously wasted. And the cop comes up to me, asks if I had been drinking, and I tell him yes at a party. They ask me if I have any booze on me and tell them yes, I do in my backpack. The cop just says, "Thanks for being honest. We knew about your party, and it all seemed under control there, and you guys can drink at a private place, but you can't be drinking in public. You're gonna have to pour out that drink that you have in your backpack where I can see it. Then you need to go and find your buddy who took that open bottle off you and tell him that you owe him one, because you would be in serious trouble if we found you with that open bottle. Now have a good night, and don't get into any more trouble." Then he just walks back to the car with the other guys and drives off. Took me about 20 minutes to find my friends and tell them what happened. One of them just starts laughing out loud, saying that he was hiding in a bush nearby and watched the whole thing go down, and thought I was about to get super busted. I only ever went to one party where the cops showed up. It felt like a rite of passage to run away when they showed up. Wouldn't do that today though. Had a cop search my backpack once and found a couple of drinks and a box of pee-pee balloons. I was with my friends at the time, so he was like, "Why are there 3 drinks, a box of pee-pee balloons, and only 2 dudes?" I was speechless. "To be fair, officer, now there's 3. Raunchy music intensifies." My brother was a cop who worked nights in Minneapolis. One snowy night near the U of M campus, he noticed a car weaving, so he pulled them over thinking there would be booze involved. Nope, it was a car full of deaf people having an argument which included the driver. He just told the driver not to sign and drive. Dude, that for sure is a real thing, and it's scary stuff. I have hearing impaired friends that are horrible drivers, and of course they leave the dome light on in the car to be able to communicate at night, which doesn't help the cause. I mean, I understand it must be boring to drive and not be able to listen to music, but man, that's so scary when they're trying to sign with somebody in the back seat. I've taken a couple of sign language courses in my day, and I never thought about doing signs while driving. I can totally see how that could be really scary. Not a cop, but I do have a radio scanner. Dispatcher. Reports of a teenager riding a skateboard unclothed down Westway. Cop. Is the suspect carrying a suspicious package? Yes, sir. His package appears to be fluorescent green. I'd say that's pretty suspicious. My brother is a cop, and he told me that one time he got a call at 9:30 in the morning for a suspicious person sitting in their car in our neighborhood. My bro goes up to him and asks him what he's doing. Dude is waiting for his wife to leave for work so he can go back home to play WoW all day instead of go to his own job. My bro tells him to go wait somewhere else because he's freaking out the neighbors. To clarify a few things, the guy was parked in a different neighborhood than his own because he was hiding from his wife until she left the house. So nobody knew him, and it's obviously suspicious to be idling your car in front of some random house in a neighborhood while kids are going to school. It's not illegal, but he took the good advice to go wait somewhere else, preferably more public like a Walmart parking lot or something. Also, the dude was scared as hell that the cops were going to tell his wife that he was hiding from her because he wanted to go back home and play video games. My brother, of course, doesn't give two craps about that. He just wants the dude to go somewhere else so people would stop calling about it and causing him needless work. I'm not sure who's weirder here, the guy who's got nothing better to do than poorly hide from his wife so he can go play video games all day, or the neighbors who have nothing better to do than look out the window all day. Hey now, I will say, if you have ever had your car broken into or have had something stolen from your house, everyone becomes suspicious after that. So I can't hate on the neighborhood watch types too much, but they shouldn't be calling the cops. My friend had a bunch of prop arms and legs in his car, college. He and his other friend were trespassing in the Northfield tunnels, Google it, and then they get back to their car where a cop is waiting. He asks to see what's in the trunk, so they open it. He jumps back a sec and quickly realizes the arms and legs are fake and he hasn't caught some type of serial killer. Then he gives them a very stern, shut the hell up, look as he calls his partner from the car to come look at this, all shaky voiced, as he tells my friend and his friend to put their hands up, hella serious. The other cop comes over, looks in the trunk and freaks the freak out, screams and runs away back to the cop car. At which point the first cop busts out laughing and tells my friend, he was in Vietnam. And then he does the get out of here gesture and sends them on their way. So basically he used my friends to pull a super cruel practical joke on his partner. I had a friend who was a barber, so he always had those creepy mannequin heads in his car and all over his house. The kind that they use to practice cutting hair. Well, one night he was getting pulled over for a minor traffic violation. License and registration, I'm gonna ask you to get out of your car and put your hands behind your head. So he cuffs my buddy and sits him down on the curb and then searches the car. And he pulls a mannequin head out of the back seat and he's like, oh, thank God. Why do you have this in your car? My buddy explains that he's going to barber school and they practice on those things. So then he and the cop, both super stressed out at this point, sit on the curb and share a cigarette. We got a call about kids, probably 11 or 12 years old, jumping across backyards. They were looking for something to steal, I guess. We searched for them for about 15 minutes. Just as I was starting to get bored with it, I hear laughing coming from a drain pipe. It's about 4 feet tall. My mate and I decide to head in. About 30 meters down the tunnel, I can see this kid bent over on all fours, pants down around his ankles. His mate is bent over, sitting on his back while the first kid's exposing his rear end. There is a third kid kneeling next to the first kid's full moon holding a lighter. They were in the midst of doing Blue Angels, aka lighting farts in a dark tunnel. I had no freaking clue what to say. We told them to come out of the drain with us. I advised them not to tell any of their friends what they were doing in that tunnel because they would probably get the wrong reputation. And I ended up driving them within a block of one of the kids' houses so the parents didn't see that they got caught. Come out with your pants up! I was a cop in the Air Force. We had just gone into a higher threat level, and around 11 at night, I saw 3 people in an empty dark field near some power lines with shovels and a garden hoe. My partner and I decided to stop them and see what was going on, because it didn't look like civil engineering or anyone that should be out there around that hour. So we go up and see that they're about 14 or 15 years old and they're all sweating and out of breath. We asked them what they're digging for, and they all say that they weren't digging, which after looking around, we didn't see any dug up dirt. So my partner asked what they're doing, and they hesitantly answer that they were LARPing. One of their dads shows up and scolds them, telling them how shady they look, apologizing to us, and we send them all back to the dad's house, which was about 100 yards away. I hold back my laughter until I get back to the car, where I have to explain to my partner what LARPing is and why I'm laughing. Imagine your LARPing skills being so good that the cops get called on you. My brother was once jumping his bike off the end of a public boat dock behind the city hall, which also housed our police station. They had it tethered so it wouldn't get lost on the bottom. A cop came out and watched for a while and said, "I'm fairly certain something about that is illegal, but I can't figure out what it is, and that looks like fun, so be safe," and walked back inside. There weren't a lot of local kids, but they all knew that we had no issue if they wanted to stop by and do some jumps, as long as they reeled the bike in and cleared the mud off afterwards. One day a bunch of us were taking turns doing jumps and basically just messing around at the lake, when this cottage kid from down the road rides up on his brand new, very expensively tricked out BMX bike. He parks up on the road a few hundred feet away from us watching, then sees his chance and just freaking hurdles his way down the ramp. A couple people try to wave him off, but this kid just goes for it, nails it at a blistering fast speed, and flies 3 or 4 times faster than any of us could ever go with the tether. He pops out of the lake waving his fist in the air, shouting and carrying on like he just stole an Oscar from Leo. He swims back to shore and everyone is just staring at him while he carries on. Eventually, one of the girls just says, "Dude, was that a new bike?" The kid's face just kind of crumpled up in defeat. We all chipped in and tried to find the bike, but our lake is flooded farmland and the bottom is 6 or 7 feet of quicksand like mud. We dove, we drudged, we poked with paddles, nothing. Kid got in so much trouble. I don't think his parents ever bought him another bike. My friend and I were skateboarding around in front of a coffee shop. Big scary security guard came over, grabbed a skateboard, rode it around the parking lot, did an ollie and a kickflip, and then gave it back and left. We're talking 350 pounds, probably 35 to 40-year-old man. Our jaws were on the floor. It's always nice to hear cool cop stories instead of the awful ones you hear on the news nowadays. A few years ago, a friend and I were walking home through a residential estate, wasted after a night out. About halfway home, a police car pulls up next to us and says that they need to talk to us. They said that the CCTV in the area had observed us entering several front gardens. Since we were wasted, we tried to explain that we had been going into people's gardens and swapping around flower pots, hanging baskets and garden ornaments with their next door neighbors. One of the cops was laughing a lot and the other seemed really confused. Luckily, they got another call and just let us carry on our way. I got a call about 2 kids, maybe teenagers, smoking herb in their parked truck down by the duck pond. You know the one. Anyways, I contacted them and they were very respectful and insisted on filming me on their cell phones while I spoke to them. I told them I wasn't interested in their herb, still illegal in my state, but I wanted to make sure they got home safe, that the driver was sober enough to operate the vehicle. I did a basic field sobriety test on the driver and determined he was good to drive, all while his buddy was filming every movement and interaction. So I decided to have a little fun. By the end of the evaluation, I had the very nervous driver doing the YMCA, sprinkler move, and a janky version of the robot before he finally realized what was happening. His buddy filming realized right away. His defensive lawyer cameraman posture dissolved into a wasted kid that was now having a good time again. The driver broke down and busted up laughing before shaking my hand and hopping in his truck. The cameraman gave me a fist bump and just said, "Thank you," in a way that I took as, wow, good to know some of you are human. It's annoying that we have to live with this stigma that gets portrayed by popular media, and quite frankly, some of us deserve it, but it's still nice to know when you get through to someone. I mean, really alter their perception and break down a barrier put up by others. Cops are here to make sure people don't hurt one another. That's it. If you're going to hurt someone else, even if it's just a strong possibility, I'm your worst enemy. But if you're just swaying from societal norms that change like the weather and being yourself, have at it, man. You only live once. Okay, time to get off my soapbox. I didn't catch them, but when I arrived at my first station after graduating from the academy, I was talking to some of the guys who had been there a while. I asked if they knew my cousin, who lived in the patrol area. Turns out they did. They had a call a few years back of some kids driving around, pulling up next to cars at traffic lights and waving a huge pleasure stick at the drivers, laughing hysterically then driving off. They were pulled over, brought down to the station, and parents were notified. There was one old-timer who was a bit of a jerk, telling me that my cousin was a pervert, as were his friends. But the other guys said that they thought it was hilarious when it happened, and they never charged the kids with anything. I still mess with my cousin about this every time I see him. I'm pretty sure the Second Amendment protects the rights to pleasure sticks. When I was a teen living in the Phoenix area, we would fill up the back of a pickup with shaved ice from behind the ice rink and then build snowmen in people's yards. We would do it at night before ringing the doorbell and driving away. One time, a neighbor called the cops after hearing a couple of teens sneaking around outside. The cop came by and found out what we were doing. Instead of getting after us, he told us to follow him somewhere. We ended up making a snowman in his own front yard. He rang the doorbell and hid around the corner while his wife and their kids came outside. There are some good cops out there. Not all of them are like the ones you see shooting people without cause. Not a cop, but I was a soldier in the Army National Guard after 9/11. This informs the rest of my story. We were tasked with securing our armories immediately after 9/11 in case anyone decided to attack a soft target. This involves 24/7 armed security by soldiers with M16s in camouflage and body armor. This was immediately after the attacks, and for those who weren't old enough to remember it, stuff was weird at that time. Well, me and several fellow soldiers were guarding our couple-acre compound in the middle of a small city. Adjacent to this compound was a park with baseball fields that teenagers would go to, hook up, and party. Well, a blacked out car pulled down the road one night and my buddy was conducting a roving patrol that night, complete with night vision goggles. Well, they weren't in our compound, but they were pretty suspicious, so we called local law enforcement. By this time, I had met my fellow soldier out back to keep an eye on them. 4 cop cars come screaming down this entrance and draw their weapons. These kids were terrified. When they found out the cops were called, they asked who called. The cops shined their lights over at us and there stood 3 soldiers in camouflage with helmets, tactical vests, night vision goggles, and M16 staring back at them. We never saw that car again. I can only imagine the stories that they tell their friends. They were released and as far as I know, no charges were brought against them. I'm pretty sure when those kids talk about that story, they end up saying, "It was just like COD, bro." One of my friends from a couple of semesters ago was a cop a few cities over. He was a cool guy and we worked on our first class presentation together. Anyways, I'm sitting in my car before our class at 7 p.m. and I decided I'm going to smoke before class. This class was required, but almost insultingly easy. I usually walk around the parking lot with my J, but security guards were doing their rounds. And while they have a reputation of being pretty laid back, I didn't want to take a chance. So I'm in my car lighting up and casually reading my textbook. It's getting kinda smoky in my car, so I look around and then I crack a window to let the smoke out. Then when I saw security was gone, I rolled the window all the way down, ashed my J, and put it back in my mouth and got back to reading. Then out of the corner of my left eye, I see a cop car coming my way. It passed behind me and I didn't think anything of it because at this point I was already zoned out. When I realized that the J was still in my mouth, I got one of those sharp pains of terror that starts in your chest and shoots all the way up to your head. And your wasted brain is like, "Freak, we're freaked up, man." I started looking around for the cop car and I didn't see it. Then I looked out my passenger window and was like, "Man, thank God my windows are tinted." It was at this moment that I noticed my driver's side window wasn't as dark as it usually is. My brain is thinking, maybe it has to do with the placement of the light? Maybe it's because I'm closer to it? Is it because oh freak, it's because I left it open? After that realization, I saw headlights again and I just knew it was the cop car. Sure enough, the berries come on and over the speaker I hear, "Show me your hands." I do as he says and I show him my hands. "Open the door from the outside and step outside of the vehicle." So I do just that. "Hands, hands, I want to see them." Oh Christ almighty, they think I'm a dealer or something, and I can't even explain myself. I'm so freaking zoned out right now. "Put your hands on the roof of the vehicle and take 1 step back." Crap, I can do this. Don't move those goddamn hands. Oh man, oh man, oh man. Now twerk. What? Twerk. Wait, did he just tell me to twerk? What the freak? I turn around and look at the cop car and then I just hear, twerk, 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 hands on the car and twerk, twerk, twerk. At this point, I'm not sure what to do or think. The officer gets out of his car and it's the dude from my class. He said he saw me smoking up in my car and wanted to mess with me. I don't know how to explain what it felt like going to class after that. Hey now, I think it's fair game for cops to mess with you if they catch you doing something illegal. I think getting embarrassed is better than getting arrested. I rolled up on a group of kids trespassing on a patch of land at night. They didn't know they were technically breaking the law because there was no signage when they came in. I planned to tell them that they needed to leave, but one of them took me aside and told me that they were taking an out-of-town friend on a snipe hunt as a much-deserved act of revenge. I couldn't resist and I joined in. Winks and nods were exchanged. I called my shift on a radio back channel and the snipe hunter was called front and center. I informed him that the snipe is an endangered species and that the act of hunting one was a felony punishable by 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. All of his conspirators denied snipe hunting, saying that they were just stargazing and didn't know the guy that was doing the hunting. He was just standing there, wide-eyed, and literally holding a bag of snipe stick in his other hand. He stuttered and stammered an excuse, and insisted the conspirators were lying. About that time, 3 more cruisers appeared, lights and all, as if choreographed. We all stepped aside and the sheriff himself made an entrance and assessed the whole situation. Dead silence. After he made the inquiries, we all busted out laughing. The whole otherwise very slow night was captured in a group photo, complete with the victim, his friends, my shift, and the sheriff. Man, this must have been hilarious. I wish I met some cops like that when I was younger. The only one I met threatened to take my friend to jail because he had a license plate on his bike that we found in a ditch. Then the cop banned all of us from skating on one of the largest streets in my city, when we didn't really do anything. It's interactions like that that make some people dislike cops, in my opinion.
What was the worst time you walked in on someone? I was living with my grandparents when I was about 19 years old, and I came home early one day from work. I walked into the bathroom and saw my grandfather, who was like 80 at the time, butt naked, staring at himself in the mirror. He was smiling and shaking around his schlong. After we both made eye contact, we both said, "Oh crap," and just turned around. I'll never forget that image in my head as long as I live.
Traumatizing, but not that bad.
When I was 8, I walked in on my dad banging my mom's best friend in my bed. She was babysitting and he was supposed to be at work. They were loud and I went to see what the noise was. My dad screamed at me to go away, so I got out of there without actually seeing them. I told my mom when she got home and she ended up spending the night in jail for breaking her best friend's nose. When she got home, she beat the crap out of my dad with a baseball bat. Wasn't the first or last time he cheated on her either. I got an awesome new Princess Jasmine bedding set out of it though. I just want to go on record that infidelity and abuse are a big no-no, and this kind of behavior really messed me up mentally growing up. OP asked for the worst, so I gave it and tried to be entertaining about it. And yes, the sheets were to replace the ones my dad banged on. I still stand by my statement that Princess Jasmine is awesome.
Well, that's a twofer right there. First you walk in on your father cheating on your mother, and then the spousal abuse? That's pretty bad.
I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 guys, so it was 2 guys per room. I usually left first because of my job. One day I realized I'd forgotten some important documents and came back to get them. I opened up the door to my room and found my roommate laying naked on his bed, legs up in the air and blow-drying his balls. He later explained to me that he had some sort of jock itch and needed to keep that area moisture-free. That image is burned into my brain to this day, and on his birthday, every year, I send him a picture of a blow-dryer.
Look, itches in tender places are just hell. I don't blame the dude, but lock the door, put a note up or something. Demoisturizing balls, knock please.
So I'm out tent camping in a state park. It's early morning, maybe 6-ish. I need the restroom down the path. I grab my shaving kit, start walking the 500 yards. About halfway, I hear a noise and look to my left. Directly into the eyes of a dude hammering away at his girl doggy style inside their tent with the door open. I pause, kinda shocked. Dude waves at me. I wave back. Girl looks up. She waves. I wave back. They continue banging. I continue walking.
I guess they just really wanted to be fully in touch with nature.
Like, if they're leaving the tent door open and everything, they wanted to be seen.
I, 25F, was being towed around a house I was planning to rent a room in from Craigslist by the owner. The last bedroom door was closed, so he knocked and opened the door to reveal a husky man with headphones on, aggressively beating off. I still rented the room.
I'm reminded of that meme where Hank Hill walks into the room. I freaking love King of the Hill, by the way. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought this was oh, good Lord!"
I didn't personally walk in, but my mom did. I was told to stay outside. I was about 15, and me and my best friend, along with my mom, went shopping, and we came home to see my brother's girlfriend's car parked in our driveway. So me and my friends were all like, "Oh, you know what they're doing," and my mom was brushing us off. She told us to wait outside and went into the house and quickly came out covering her eyes, repeating, "I saw nothing." She caught my brother and his girlfriend mid-act in the living room. My mom was mortified, and me and my friend were thrilled we were right.
Doesn't matter how traumatized the mom is from seeing her little boy being a man, it just matters that you were right.
A walking in story from a party I was at when we were all about 17 to 18. A couple of hours in, everyone had turned up except one of the birthday girl's best friends. She eventually calls and says she's out at a club and can she bring the guy she's met, whose name is apparently Sketch. Half an hour later, they turn up pretty drunk. After about 15 minutes, we realize they have vanished upstairs. Birthday girl doesn't really want them fooling around in her bed, but no one wants to walk in on them either. So we send the drunkest guy up to call them down. He toddles off upstairs and then about a minute later comes back into the living room looking pale and distraught. He sits down. We ask what happened.
I went upstairs and opened the door, and he was going down on her. And then he looked over at me, and I think he was a vampire. There was blood all over his mouth, so I left.
Turned out they started fooling around and it became clear it was her time of the month, but Sketch decided to power on through. We accidentally sent up the one person who in a drunken haze was not mentally equipped to deal with this at all. He looked broken for the rest of the night.
Can't say I blame the guy. That probably would have kind of ruined my night as well.
So, this happened last semester, but I got home around 11:30 p.m. and no one was home. I'm like, alright, whatever. I go to my room, throw my stuff down and grab my water bottle. I walk into the kitchen to fill it where the front door is, small 3 BDRM apartment through the school. And in walks this girl. I'm like, what the hell is this girl doing in my house? We make eye contact. I realize it's my roommate in full drag. Fake boobs, wig, high heels, all of it. All he says is,
I can explain.
already having seen a lot of this kid's oddities, I just say, don't bother, you do you, man. And I just went to fill my bottle and continue to play Civ or something the rest of the night. He now occasionally just chills in drag and talks makeup and clothes with my other roommate's girlfriend. I'm riding this sitting next to this 7-foot unicycle propped against the wall. It's been an interesting year to say the least. Disgusting, utterly debaucherous. I cannot abide by a 7-foot goddamn unicycle. 4 foot is the max that a unicycle should be. You'll break your goddamn neck riding that thing. It's just impractical.
TLDR, I'm probably in a smut video online titled RA Interrupts Gay Threesome. What happens next you won't believe. I used to be a resident assistant. I was doing room inspections with my partner, RA. I had given all my residents over a week notice, taped a letter to their door alerting them that I would be coming around. Everything was going fine until we got to room 312. I still remember the room number to this day. We knocked on the door 3 times with no answer. I announced that I was keying into the dorm. We get inside. Everything's normal. I go to the individual bedrooms and knock 3 times again. As soon as I announce I'm keying in, my residents open the door in just gym shorts. Hey, what's up? Live Legacy? Just doing our scheduled room checks? Oh, okay, come on in, without even hesitating or giving me a warning on what I was about to walk into. As he opens the door, I see a naked man dart across the room and into the bathroom. I didn't know he was gay, so that was surprising. But then I walk into the room and look to my left. I see a tiny Asian man was standing in the corner with a laptop in front of him. He was only wearing a cheetah print thong. I quickly avert my eyes and look to my right, and I see a camera on a tripod. I dart out of there, immediately yelling, "You passed! Have a nice day!" They could have had kilos of booger sugar in the corner and I wouldn't have cared.
How on earth did this one not get gold? This one was hilarious.
Didn't really walk in, but the most traumatizing time, when I was 6, I had friends over for a play date, and I went to go hide underneath my grandparents' bed with my friends. My grandparents came into the room after us, so they had no idea we were in there, so they started undressing and went on the bed. Sound started. I started crying, but they were basically deaf, so they couldn't hear me. But my mom walked by the room and thought she heard me crying, so she walks in. Grandparents start screaming at my mom. Mom starts screaming at my grandparents. I run out from under the bed with my friends trailing behind me. It was awful.
That is basically the exact same thing that happened in an episode of F is for Family, which is a hilarious show. Another, not walked in, but my parents divorced when I was a baby. I ended up living with my dad and got very sporadic visits from my mom in my hometown of hers. I lived half the country away from her. One summer, in the first few days of a visit to her town, I thought I was alone in the house. I was 15. My siblings were several years younger than me and out playing with their friends, and my stepdad and mom, I thought, were at work. It's hot outside, my stepdad is a tightwad, so there was no AC in the house. I decided I was going to go upstairs and soak in a cool bath for a bit. Since I think I'm alone, I start shedding clothes as I'm going upstairs instead of waiting to get into the bathroom. As soon as I reach the top of the stairs, my mom jumps out wearing nothing but a lacy thong and yells, "Surprise!" Turns out my stepdad was supposed to be home early that day, and since I had only been there a couple of days, she assumed the heavy footsteps coming up the stairs were his. So there was a very surprised, almost naked 15-year-old looking at a very surprised, naked 32-year-old who also happened to be his mom. We talked about it one time several weeks later just so she could explain, and it hasn't been mentioned since. For you weirdos, no arms were broken, I was repulsed, not aroused, and I guess you would have to ask her many partners over the last 4 decades if she was hot. I'm not mad at y'all though, this is what makes Reddit worth my time. It's like a double KO in a fighting game, only with trauma.
Double trauma. I was 12 at a sleepover with a good friend of mine. It was around mid-afternoon. I was getting myself some water when I come back to see my friend getting lectured about how messy his room was. It was immaculate. And how he should take responsibility for things. He did. His dad is pulling up carpet fuzz and yelling at him for it. My friend is crying. I kind of pretend that I didn't walk in on that and hung out in the kitchen reading cereal box ingredients. As soon as the dad walks out, his girlfriend comes in through the door in tears. She had totaled her Corvette running a red light, and now the boyfriend was hysterical, yelling at her and us. They go to their room and there's this banging and fighting noise. Then everything was normal. Took me bloody forever to realize they were addicted to booger sugar. The dad and the girlfriend sound like absolute tosspots. That's all I have to say on that, really.
I went on a road trip with my family when I was like 13 or so. We stopped overnight at a motel and my mom asked me to fill the ice bucket with ice from the machine down the hall. I grabbed the bucket and went off to fill it up. When I got back, I had the terrible realization that I didn't remember what our room number was. Starting to panic, figured the only thing to do was to pick a door at random and hope for the best. I picked a door. It was the wrong door. An old man answered wearing nothing but tighty whities, a wife beater, and black dress socks. Behind him, 2 other similarly clad gentlemen sat on the bed next to 3 old ladies in negligee. I asked them where the ice machine was, even though I already had ice in the bucket that I was holding in my hands. He pointed down the hall and I said, "Thank you," and took off. I guess my mom heard me and opened the door to wave me back in. I was only off by a few doors. Worst episode of Showcase Showdown ever.
And then you have to sit there and wonder what they're doing a few doors down from you the entire time. Awful. Technically, I didn't walk in on this situation, but bear with me. Something I liked to do when I was very young was bring shoes into the different rooms of the house. I was always very proud of myself and wanted to show everyone that I brought more shoes indoors. Once, I had the brilliant idea to hide in my parents' closet with a pair of shoes so I could surprise them with my ingenuity of now hiding shoes in their closet. I made this, what I thought to be at the time, a very well thought out and super professionally planned scheme. Step 1 of my plan was to set into motion my getting the shoes and bringing them into the room with me undetected. This proved to be an easy success. Step 2 was supposed to go a little something along the lines of show them the shoes once they came into the room, etc., etc. That is where my plan goes all wrong. There I was, sitting in the closet waiting for my parents to re-enter their room, when I finally heard the door open. Just as I got my stuff together and was ready to leap from my hiding place and bombard my parents with shoes, I froze. I heard my mum moaning and stopped in my tracks, not knowing what I was supposed to do. Now my plan had been disrupted. So I peeked from the crack in the door of the closet to see what was happening and saw my parents getting it on.
I didn't know what to do and knew that it would be more awkward for me to open the door and leave than just sit and wait for it to be over. So, logically, I sat and waited. When my parents left the room, I waited a bit before leaving the room myself and pretended it never happened.
A specific individual sounds more like they're a dog with the ability to use a keyboard with a Reddit account.
Probably late to the party, but I'll post anyways. I was the one walked in on. In high school, I snuck out of the house late at night to meet some friends. And let's just say I was very hungry when I got home. So I raided the kitchen pantry and took the only two edible things that were ready to eat. Plain tortilla chips and plain Hershey's chocolate bars. I go up to my room and start eating the chocolate and chips. Mind you, I sleep naked and it was a little warm in the house. So I'm naked on top of all the blankets, and with the state of mind I was in, I was making a pretty big mess. Crumbs and chocolate bits getting all over my chest. Well, then I pass out. Here comes the problem. I have always been hard to wake up. We're talking now I have to set 12 alarms every morning for work. So every morning my parents, Mom until this incident, would come to my room, open my door, turn on my light, say time to get up, and close the door. Turning on the light was the only way to get me out of bed. So, my poor mother comes to my room to wake 17-year-old me up, and as a 17-year-old boy who is just waking up, I was fully erect. Doors open, lights flip on, and there is her son laying like a dead starfish on his bed, chips, crumbs, and melted chocolate all over his chest with a raging boner. Not only that, but from her angle, she's staring right down the devil's alley at my taint, balls, and boner. So she screams at the top of her lungs. This scares the crap out of me, so I wake up and start screaming at the top of my lungs. Now she's kind of running in place, flapping her arms around, screaming. I'm screaming naked in horror in my bed, and my dad comes bounding over thinking something is wrong and bursts the door fully open. He yells, "Oh, what the hell?" I try to yell, "Get out!" and cover myself, but really just manage to yell, "Grrr!" as I rip the blanket up and fall off the bed to the side. Breakfast was quiet that morning. I'm going to use the Devil's Alley in the future. That was funny as hell.
I would just like to preface I was 5 years old. I was at a campground and headed over to a friend's camper to wake her up in the AM. I walked up to the loft area and shouted her name. Turns out she was in the room to the left, not the right. Her cousin shot up out of bed, staring right at me like my holler was a fire alarm. This wouldn't be worse until you consider she had a glass eye that apparently drifted inwards while she slept. I had no idea who this woman was or what was up with her eye, but I screamed, "No!" the second she opened her eyes. I ran 90 miles per hour that morning back to my place. The worst part was my naive reaction, clearly.
I know a swath of very different people, but I've never met anyone with a glass eye personally. Yet. Or as far as I know. Not sure if this belongs here, but it's a nice departure from all the 18+ related stories already posted in the comments, so here goes anyway. This happened in 2005. I was 21 years old and working my first full-time job during university vacation. One day, my boss allowed me to go home early, so I raced home excited and looking forward to an afternoon enjoying the epic summer weather. I parked my car in our garage, and as I walked through the two interleading doors into the kitchen, I suddenly heard the sound of footsteps running down our passage away from me towards the 3 bedrooms. I knew my 19-year-old sister was home, so I just assumed that what I'd heard was the sound of one of the many female friends she regularly had over. She was a total socialite, running away from me. I figured maybe said friend had been slightly undressed or something. I don't know, I didn't have much time to think because what happened next happened really fast. A few steps later, and I'm in the dining room from which the rest of the house fans out in 3 different directions. Then I see my parents' bedroom door at the end of the passage open up, and my sister sticks her head out and screams at me, "You mad though? Get out, there are 2 guys in the house." As she says that, she slams the door closed again. And then, sure enough, 2 black guys appear from one of the bedrooms off the passage. They're both slightly younger, maybe 19 years old and much skinnier than me. Bizarrely, my first instinct was to negotiate with them to get them to leave. I think the reason for this was that both looked as surprised to see me as I was them, and it was clear that they hadn't planned for this, so I think I figured, well, now that they'd been caught, they'd readily leave. My only thought was to get them out of the house. At this point, I still didn't know what my sister's condition was, whether she'd been hurt or anything. On my way there, I'm also trying to figure out how I'm going to open the door to let them out because I've left my house key in the kitchen where I came in, and there's no key nearby to open the locked steel security gate.
Before I get the chance to even make a plan as I reach the entrance hall, suddenly both guys jump on me and stop me from going any further. I grab onto the door frame for dear life, and right about now I notice that one of them is armed with a huge knife from our kitchen. Oh crap, I think. I'm about to feel what it's like to get stabbed, but by some miracle he doesn't stab me. Now I'm screaming for help louder than I've screamed in my entire existence, hoping that I'll be loud enough for someone to hear outside the house and bring help. And in the meantime, these two guys are trying harder and harder to pull me off the doorframe. My shirt tears in half and I sprain 3 fingers from the strain of holding onto that damn frame. Then a moment of clarity. I remember that there's a panic button linked to our armed response company right outside my parents' bedroom. I scream my sister, press the panic button, and I hope she hears me because I'm all out of ideas and all out of hope. Then I hear her shout the last thing I wanted to hear. I can't. I'm tied up. The panic button is mounted at like shoulder height on the wall. In that moment, the most dire sense of panic and fear sets in. People say about scary moments that I nearly shat myself, and suddenly I almost understand what that means. I can feel my butthole puckering uncontrollably while I wonder what the hell is going to happen to me now that nobody is coming for help. Just as I'm giving up hope, the house alarm starts wailing. It is loud, so loud it physically hurts my ears, and the siren is mounted in the ceiling right above me and these two thugs, so it is super uncomfortable. I scream at the thugs that the police are coming. I noticed that they looked almost as afraid as I am. They let go of me and run down the passage. Turns out they left via my bedroom window. I later learned that following my scream for her to press the panic button, my sister was somehow able to sort of shimmy her way up the wall from a prone position to where she could reach the panic button. I also learned that frighteningly, thanks to recent home renovations, the wire in the room next door linking the alarm system to the phone line had been cut. So although the alarm went off, nobody was coming to help. Fortunately, the two thugs didn't know that. This whole episode must have taken no longer than maybe 2 minutes tops, but it felt like it went on for a half hour. Anyway, seconds later, there's a knock on the door. It's my friend Bruce popping over for a visit, and I'm still in such shock at that point that I can barely think straight enough to let him in. But I did, and it's lucky he was there as he went to find my sister and untied her. Fortunately, she was unharmed, although she was convinced that the two had planned to grape her and that the only thing that prevented it was my early arrival home. We immediately called the cops, who arrived very quickly along with a volunteer trauma counselor, our armed response guy, and an armada of the other security companies and agencies in the area. They are all linked to the same radio network and all assist each other very effectively. In spite of the police's genuinely best efforts, by then it was too late and unfortunately the two thugs were never caught. On the plus side, my folks immediately bought a new house in a much safer suburb far from that one, and within a few months we were out of that hellhole of a suburb. And also it forced me to take stock of my personal safety, so now I'm far more aware and I'm far more prepared should anything like that ever happen again. God forbid. I'm sure a lot of people are thinking the same thing right now. I want to hit the gym so goddamn hard right now. It's these kind of situations that you need to be prepared for. And having a home invader, 2 home invaders, is probably absolutely terrifying, especially when you've got family that you don't know what their condition is. Like, I can completely understand why this dude's mind just went completely blank, why he reacted the way he did. I know I'd go absolutely berserk if there was a stranger in my house, stealing my stuff, trying to hurt my family. I don't frickin' know. But then again, in the UK, you're not actually allowed to defend yourself, it seems, from people who are trying to commit violent acts against you because our laws are, well, I can't use that word, but I'll say stupid, and you can think about what I actually wanted to say. Anyway, try and stay sharp, be ready for people who try to mess you about, hurt you, whatever. Hit the gym a little bit, do a bloody boxing class or something. I did frickin' Jeet Kune Do, and frankly, this has put me in a foul mood all of a sudden.
What was your best "you have no power here" moment? When I realized I could just hang up on my sister when she wanted to yell at me on the phone. As a 12-year-old, that was a powerful moment. My sister is 6 years older than me, so after she was 18 and out of the house, she realized she could talk to me any way she wanted, and if I wanted to say something back, she would run to our parents. Fast forward 6 years, her and my parents took me out to eat for my 18th birthday, and she caught an attitude and I cussed her out. She gets the fish look on her face and looks at my parents, at which my mom laughs, shrugs, and says, "He's an adult now and he's tired of your crap." This is funny. Me and my brother did not get along that much when we were younger, but the moment he moved out, we got a lot closer. Sometimes you just don't make good roommates with people. I worked at Domino's and there was this old lady who ordered from us a lot and was always unpleasant. One day she calls and makes an order she must make a lot because she knew exactly how much it was supposed to cost down to the penny. I put in her order and tell her how much it is, and she starts getting upset because the order is 2 cents more than what she usually pays, and starts accusing me of trying to steal money from her. She asks, "How much money do you make stealing 2 cents from every customer?" Well, if I was trying to steal money and I did it to 100 customers, I would have made a whole $2. I didn't know what to do because she wouldn't accept the order and it was exactly how much she thought it would be. And there's nothing I can do to remove 2 cents from an order, so I asked the manager and she just tells me to hang up. I was new at the time, and I'm guessing that this wasn't the first time the store got screwed over by this woman. It felt amazing, and that was the only time I had to deal with that customer. I used to work at a call center, and I loved hanging up on terrible customers. I once worked for a shady company that sold and repaired expensive American vacuum cleaners. I was the service manager. I had planned a 6-week scuba diving trip with a mate for 2 years. They were well aware of this and said it was fine. When the time came close, I put in my application for 6 weeks leave. I was called into the owner's office and was told that I could only take 3 weeks. I had saved up the time with their permission. I pointed this out and they were adamant that 3 weeks was the most that they were prepared to authorize. I even tried to negotiate them to 5 weeks, but they firmly rejected it. So I walked away from the office, wrote my resignation letter, and left. Had a great holiday diving the Great Barrier Reef. They rang me up weekly for a solid 3 months offering all sorts of incentives to come back, but by then I had already won a great government job. Screw you, Tony and Ann. If the military ever taught me anything, it's to get everything in writing. That, "Hey sir, I'm taking leave for the 4th of July for 4 weeks," and his, "Yeah, sure," in passing in February means nothing unless you have it in some form of physical writing. Email, paperwork, or whatever you have, document everything. I agree with this statement. Always create a paper trail at your job. It will most likely save your butt in the future. My boss sold the company, and about a week after the official switch to the new owners, he called me up and asked me to do something. I told him my consulting fees were $120 an hour. He didn't take me up on it, unfortunately. When I left a job, I was invited to meet the CEO because he was unhappy I was leaving and wanted to understand why. I explained that I was not being paid enough and the recently announced pay raise was not good enough. He got irritated and in a patronizing tone started trying to lecture me on how I should have handled the situation better. I interrupted him. He didn't like that. So I added, "I'm leaving. I have nothing to lose," and then informed him that I had already been let down over pay multiple times, had witnessed others trying to get more pay and being refused, so I had no interest in begging to be paid what I already deserved to be paid. At that company that I worked for, the managers just stopped giving exit interviews at all. It just became a big circus. Man, the only job I ever quit was also the only job that ever gave me an exit interview. I had nothing really to say, so I ended up just saying that the break room needed recycling bins. The interviewer was so confused. I had a friend who worked in the selling of online spicy content advertisements. He was making them millions a year via Cam and had all his clients up there spending. Repeatedly asked for a raise and they said that they couldn't afford it. He got another job that almost doubled his salary and then he showed them the offer and asked for $10K more than they were offering or he would go to the new firm with his clients. They cursed him out, told him that he was a traitor and said that there were more dignified ways to do this. In the end though, they gave him the wage he wanted. He asked for it in writing and then he forwarded it to the rival firm to negotiate the original offer. They matched the additional $10K and he bounced anyway with his clients and got his old jerk bosses to help him get another $10K of salary at his new job. Had a client freak out on us and harass us with cell phone calls every few minutes because we couldn't accommodate her needs. She wanted to make her countertops larger than the actual slab of granite. You can't grow rock. So we just refused her deposit and told her not to call us anymore. She was speechless. She was trying to get a discount and now she had to start the whole process elsewhere. We don't abide by the customer is always right. Firing the customer is definitely a thing. Sometimes 20% of your business requires 80% of the effort. Businesses that want to do better look hard at that 20%. I did wedding photography for a few years before every person on the planet had a digital camera. During a consultation, the fiance asked me if I had an umbrella insurance policy in case they were disappointed with the photos and wanted to sue me. He wasn't joking. He called me later to let me know that they decided to choose me as their photographer. I told him thanks, but no thanks, citing creative differences. Some people are idiots. Reminds me of a story back when I was in high school. One of our extended group of friends was a semi-annoying guy most of us tolerated. We'll call him Todd. Todd got into a car accident with one of our other friends and came out with a couple of cuts and bruises. No big deal. A couple of months later, we were all joking around in front of another friend's place and are about to hop into another friend's car. Todd decides that this is a good time to say, "Hey, make sure you guys don't get into an accident. I didn't want to sue the other friend at the time, but it was probably a mistake. Could have gotten a lot of money." Friend with the car's mom hears that from the porch and runs over to cuss Todd out and informs my friend that since she pays for the insurance on the car, like a nice mom, Todd is banned from that vehicle, just in case because she doesn't want any bloody lawsuits. Everyone else in the friend group talks it over and agrees this is a sensible precaution. And that's the story of why Todd had to take the bus everywhere until he got his own car. Man, I think everyone's had a Todd in their friend group before. This was my last job, was hired to be doing PC repair, only to be told an hour before my first shift that there wasn't any hours available for that, and that they could put me elsewhere. Begrudgingly I accepted as I turned down another position and needed the work. Fast forward a few months and the manager decides I'm going to be filling in for the only person handling shipping and receiving for this giant department store, single-handedly with 3 days of training. So of course things aren't going well, as this is a 2-person position at minimum for 8 hours and I'm expected to do it in 6. The last day on the job, I'm swamped. Vendors are fighting with each other over the dock space and another manager comes up freaking out on me because I couldn't get the extra work done, and I told her repeatedly that I couldn't be done. Exasperated, I pleaded my case, to which she callously said, "I don't give a crap." Now I'm getting mad. She replied to me at this point and says, "Do you know who you're talking to?" I replied, "Yeah, the bee who now is running this poop show because I'm out." $11.35 an hour with my promised hours gutted was not worth it. I was hired to build a website. I knew basic HTML and was forced to apply. They wanted to pay me an hourly wage rather than actually getting a professional. In short, the site consisted of listing all the items they had for sale in pretty much a single table on the site, as they took old appliances, TVs, freezers, fridges, etc., and sold them to various third world countries. So I had to take the pictures of all the products to have the images on the sites. They give me a cheap camera that dies after every 2 pictures I take. Boss's wife and another random staff member are there. All they do is sit on their butts chatting and do no real work, leaving the actual work to the other staff. I point out that the camera is dead. They tell me that I'm lying. Suit yourself, I'll sit down and do nothing at all until the boss is back next week. The next day I'm told to do work, point out that the camera is still broken, and get told to take it back if I want to, but while I'm out of the office I'm not getting paid. So I stay sat down doing nothing. I will point out that the actual site was built in the first day. It was literally just a white page with their contact details on it and a list of the items and prices. Hardly some long drawn out thing that actually needed work. So the next day, guy comes in to look at the stock and buy some, and asked if we have a camera. I immediately offer him the one that was given and point out that it doesn't work, but if he can get it going, he's welcome to use it. Boss's wife states that it does in fact work and that I'm an idiot. Potential buyer looks it over for a few minutes, tells her rather bluntly that it doesn't work, and I grab my coat and tell her I'm done here as well. Boss did try calling me the week after to go back, but I had no intention of working in that office with her. Plus, what am I going to do once I've gotten the pictures anyways? I was hardly going to be kept on to take one picture every month or so. I would have probably stayed at that job if I was collecting a paycheck for doing nothing. My old job had so much downtime in between assignments that I started taking my laptop to work and editing my YouTube videos. I was able to put out so much content while still getting paid. I was working in retail and a customer walked up and asked if since the ATM was broken, if she could buy something then return it for cash. I had no clue, so I called over another employee who had been there for a while and they said no. Furious, she demanded to speak to our manager. We call over the supervisor of our section and he listened to her question and he said no. Furious, she demands his manager. He calls over the manager and she shows up. Surprising, the answer was no. Customer is red in the face and demands another manager. We call over another manager, wink wink. She asks again and he says no. When she said she wanted his manager, the owner said, "I'm the owner of this store. The answer is no. It's against company policy." She stormed out, surprisingly not asking for the CEO of the company. She didn't take no from 2 employees, 1 supervisor, 1 manager, or the owner. And Jesus freaking Christ, when you have 5 people of increasing power lined up telling you no, and there is a line of bored customers behind you, I think you need to stop. As someone who worked retail for many years, I will tell you, people will complain as long as they can if they think they can get what they want. I had found another job and was just waiting it out to get my bonus. For about 3 months, I was free to express myself in ways I wouldn't have otherwise. I had noticed that my vacation time had not been approved, and normally I would have asked about it, but I decided to see how it might play out. My manager called me in about 2 weeks before my vacation to inform me that it was denied. I wasn't the least upset, but I informed her that I was going to take it anyways. She threatened me in every way under the sun, which only made me laugh at her. Everyone was surprised when I left her office smiling as they had heard her. I went to check my desk, printed off my resignation, and gave it to her. Got my bonus, got my vacation, and also got an extra 2 weeks paid because I was going to a competitor and they didn't want me sharing information. I did something similar. I handed in my 2 weeks notice at this one place as I had already got hired in another city, and I was going to move. The manager, who was just the worst human being spreading misery in a bag of skin, tried to tell me that it's my responsibility to find and train a replacement. And if she doesn't like them, then I'll have to stay until she finds someone she does like. I told her straight up, in 2 weeks, I'm gone. Or you can fire me right now. I don't care. I'm not spending 1 second of my time finding a replacement. That's your problem. It's not my fault you're such an insufferable thunder bee that no one wants this job. At that point, she was actually yelling at me. I could no longer use this place as a reference, like I could possibly give a crap. I can't use my last job as a reference either. I made a TikTok video of myself flipping off every camera in the building on my last day. I also hid a bunch of comedic stickers of myself all over the building for people to randomly find. Company did restructuring and laid off about 30 of us. My boss, picture female Limburg, gave me my contract package, which also included a lecture of if I was a better worker, the company wouldn't be doing this. After a month, they realized it was a mistake and told us that they were nullifying our contracts and that we could have our jobs back. I said that my attorney wasn't aware of a contract nullification given in the language in the document. And if they didn't want to stand by their commitment, we had already retained counsel, so whatever would happen, would happen. They came back and said we could have another 1-year package over and above salary if we stayed for a full year. I quit on the 366th day, and my boss told me that she was hurt and that this was very hard for her. I just called her a psychopath and walked out of the building. I was in a wedding party, and there was a brief lull in between scheduled parts, and we were all just milling around waiting. The bridesmaid, known for being obnoxiously bossy, starts barking out orders to every single person. As soon as she's finished, the wedding planner, who was standing right behind her, says, "Nobody do any of that," and then told us to sit tight. It was great. There's always that one person that tries to take charge when somebody else is already in charge. Got out of the Army and joined the Air Force National Guard in my home state. 20 minutes after leaving my new base for the first time, I receive a phone call from a guy introducing himself as a sergeant first class from the Army Reserve, informing me that his system shows my name had been pulled from the reserve pool to deploy to Iraq within 3 months, and he congratulated me. I kindly informed him that 1, I had just returned from deployment before getting out and was still guaranteed more than 3 months stateside, and 2, I had enlisted in the Air Guard and therefore exempt. He got irritated, raises his tone of voice, and said, "Well, you better get that paperwork to me ASAP because my system says you're going." I told him I signed a contract which binds me to that, not your system. It's not my job to update to ensure your system is up to date. I give him the name of the organization I was now affiliated with, the city, the state I was in, and my recruiter's name, rank, and personal phone number. Now you have several different ways to contact who you need in order to get your system updated, and I just hung up on him. Question? Did you join the Air National Guard in part to keep what tried to happen from happening? Was this pretty common for the Army to try to reel people back in? No and no. I switched because as part of the out-processing from active duty, you had to schedule an appointment with the National Guard rep. This particular guy touted $20,000 bonus for my job in this particular group announcement. But when I went in for my appointment just 4 days later, suddenly it was gone. I didn't like being taken for a fool. The Air National Guard offered said enlisting bonus, plus a little less grueling lifestyle. Overwhelming majority of inactive reserves for the armed forces never get recalled unless there's some nationally known and televised escalation in fighting, such as Iraq in 07 or 08. Or World War III breaks out suddenly and there's a huge demand for seasoned service members. Credit union tried to bill my father's estate for a card they wouldn't provide documentation for. I told them in detail why this wasn't going to happen. After my father passed away, there was a small amount of estate-related issues to take care of. I was the legal executor of his estate. While I was sorting through things, I started getting letters from a local credit union regarding a credit card account of his that they wanted paid off. Problem was, I could find no evidence on my end in all of my dad's paperwork of him having had that credit card. And though I knew he had a savings account with them, I didn't recall any prior bills from them regarding said credit card. And I had been handling his bills close to a year before his passing. I went in to ask for evidence and got told that only the CEO could handle the matter. She was on vacation that week, so I left my name and number to have her get back to me. When she finally got back to me, she didn't offer any evidence, but instead offered a number of demands that I immediately pay the money, and if there wasn't enough money in my dad's estate, I should sell the house that he owned for the alleged debt of $600. Pointing out that he had not, in fact, owned said house for quite some time by the time he died fell on deaf ears. The letters continued, some personally written and rather harassing in tone. I was feeling rather concerned as I didn't know exactly what they could do or what my options were. I know the smart thing would have been to retain an estate lawyer to handle it, but what do you do when you're not an attorney or don't have the money to retain one? I had been handling things myself as the most financially minded of my siblings, and trying to handle things as a matter of common sense and common decency. There wasn't a lot of assets or debts with the estate. It seems that it should have been pretty straightforward, and other than this case, all of it went smoothly. Fortunately, Oregon state laws are actually really easy to read for a layman. I spent several nights studying the various sections and determined exactly how things should go, and I wrote a letter, sent certified delivery with a return receipt, back to the credit union CEO. In the letter, I stated the following. First, that there is no evidence present for the claim. I was formally denying in my capacity as the executor, which the law allowed, with the window of opportunity of 30 days to appeal the decision in court. Second, that if she wished to make any appeal to me personally and save on the court fees, she needed to provide documentation of the account, including a record of all transactions and changes to justify the amount claimed. Naturally, I got a letter back 4 weeks later. It contained some paperwork, including the paperwork establishing my dad's savings account, but nothing establishing the credit card. Further, the letter stated that it would be too difficult to provide full records of all the transactions. Any bankers out there, take note, never tell a programmer that it's too difficult for you to access your own data. We know it's either BS or that you're admitting incompetence. This would have been a 5-minute database query for me, and that's if I had to look up the tables first. The letter reiterated the demand for immediate payment, again stating the house, which again, not actually my dad's, but she kept insisting it was, and said that it would need to be sold for payment. I wrote another letter. In this letter, I clarified several points for her. First, that as she had not provided the required documentation, she had not actually made an appeal that would be subject to evaluation, let alone acceptance. Therefore, the original denial of claim stood unchanged. Second, that it is not her place to determine my father's assets, as she is not the executor of state. Third, that even if her claim were to be granted, Oregon law requires 6 months from the descendant's passing to receive all claims before any of those claims may be paid out. And by demanding immediate payment, she was attempting to get me to break the law. Fourth, that Oregon law declares priority of claims by the nature of them, and credit card debts were ranked N, where the above included taxes, medical debts, and various other things. Even if her claim had been granted, she could not be paid unless there was money left after paying all the higher priority debts. And even if the house had been included, that wouldn't have been the case. And fifth, as the 1-month deadline for appealing in court would have expired by the time they received this letter, they had exhausted all of their legal options, and further attempt to pursue this claim would constitute unlawful harassment, and charges would be pressed in such an instance. I never heard back from her again. This was a massive W if I've ever seen one. Good on the OP, even though I didn't understand half of it.
What was the biggest plot twist that happened in your life? My mom and I haven't really had a relationship for the past 5 years, for a lot of reasons. A couple of huge parts of that being my having left the religion that I was raised in and her having severe bipolar disorder that made her nearly impossible to deal with, which she refused to maintain treatment for. We have only spoken once in the last 5 years and it was awful. It was about a year and a half ago. I drove down to California to visit her, 450 miles from me, and tried to patch things up. It ended up in a huge blowout fight and generally went as poorly as it possibly could. We never spoke again. One morning in May this year, my dad showed up at my door randomly. He and my mom had been divorced for many years and said we needed to talk. The apartment building my mom was living in had been set on fire and she didn't make it out. I still can't believe how hard it hit me. It changed me, maybe forever. The worst part was about 3 weeks ago when I was trying to remember the password to an old PayPal account. I had to have it reset and it was sent to an old email address that I haven't used in years. When I logged in, I found an email from her, sent just shortly before she died, apologizing and trying to reconnect and make amends. We had been out of contact for so long it was the last email address she had for me, but since I hadn't been using it for years, I didn't get her message until months after her death. That is exceedingly tragic, and I just feel like even if you don't see eye to eye, you need to have some method of communication and keep each other up to date on how to get to each other, at least if there is some kind of emergency in your lives. Wife was pregnant with our third and last planned child. We ended up in ER. She was miscarrying. The nurse cried because the fetus was not viable, so there was nothing to be done. It was horrible. One of the first times I felt completely helpless as an adult. Well, turns out the miscarry was actually her body making room for twins. The girls are now 5. Went from losing 1 to gaining 2. I apologize for poor phrasing. I typed it late on mobile. Let me clear up some things. The couple previous ultrasounds only showed a single baby. There was only a single heartbeat. The miscarry symptoms, horrible cramping, pressure, blood loss, was her body preparing for twins. We did not lose a baby. We were told we were losing it by doctors and had accepted that. The position of fetus B was in a dangerous location that would make overall development and C-section very dangerous. We were told the second time that we'd more than likely lose a baby. My wife Grace was put on respite and went on to carry the twins to full term. The unlikely twin is named Grace. Smiley face. That certainly started off rocky, but turned out all right in the end, thank goodness.
I was transferred to a division. Within a few months, my new supervisor and I hated each other. She was incompetent and I spoke up when she screwed up. She made my life hell and finally decided to give me a job that she thought would make me quit. I packed up my stuff in a box and asked for help moving to my new desk. She said she didn't have anyone to spare. I was carrying my box and didn't see a spill on the floor, ironically just outside her office. I slipped, fell, and broke my knee. I am on permanent disability, very legitimately received a huge settlement, lifetime health care, retired early. She was demoted, then fired partially due to the way she handled my case. This all happened a few years ago. Recently, when my husband and I were grocery shopping, I saw her in the store. I didn't want to see her, but my husband caught her eye and gave her a big thumbs up. She looked angry.
That sounds like a happy ending, but the fact that they're on disability for the rest of their life after breaking their knee and stuff, I would be utterly and unfathomably miserable if I could not move properly. I love being able to move. I like going out on sunny day strolls and riding my bike and stuff. The money might help, yeah, but I just appreciate my ability to move and stuff, personally.
I met a girl through Plenty of Fish and dated her for a year. She lived 6 minutes up the street from me, so we saw each other quite often. Both of us were quite introverted, so we mainly only hung out with each other. We both considered the relationship to be serious and exclusive. Anyway, right from the start of the relationship, I noticed that she would text this one guy pretty frequently. I asked her about him, and she told me that he was her tattoo artist. Just to be snoopy, I checked out the website of the place she got her tattoos done. Sure enough, there was a tattoo artist there with the same first name as the guy in her phone, but the last name was different. I asked her about it, and she quickly called me out on being paranoid, and how it was ridiculous to think that she would lie to me. I agreed, it was pretty paranoid of me. Maybe 5 months later into the relationship, I'm on Facebook and I decide to search the name of the guy in her phone. A profile comes up in the same small city we both live in, but there is no profile picture or anything. I decide to bring it up with her again because now there is 2 Facebook profiles, one who is actually a tattoo artist and one who has the same name that is in her phone. She freaks out on me for bringing it up again and tells me that I'm crazy. I agreed but just wanted a straight answer. She told me that I had nothing to be worried about. I apologized and we got over it. About a year into the relationship, I found her on Plenty of Fish. I would periodically go on there to see if she recreated her profile. We both deleted our profiles. I found a profile that I thought might be hers, but obviously no pictures. I catfished it and it turned out to be her. She was back on Plenty of Fish and looking for guys. I had all the evidence I needed and I was going to confront her with it the next day and break up with her. However, I thought that if I was going to break up with her, I was going to message this Facebook profile I had found that matched the name in her phone just out of curiosity. Plot twist. I message the guy. He gets back to me immediately. We converse and it turns out that he is her boyfriend. I had been her second boyfriend the entire time. She met him 2 months before she met me. She bounced back between me and him for an entire year. Neither me or him knew about each other. He saw my name in her phone once and she said that I was her tattoo artist. Every time I ever called her out, I was right. Every time she was gone mysteriously at night, she was with him. Every time she said she was hanging out with a friend of hers, she was with him. She doesn't actually have any friends. It was always him. Anyway, we both broke up with her the next morning and met the next day to have a beer. Haven't spoken with him since.
While I find behavior like this somewhat reprehensible, I must say it is rather impressive she kept this charade going for over a year. But I will also say that this person sounds like a naturally paranoid individual, but they were absolutely on point.
Bill was a self-made millionaire by the time he was 18 years old. That was in the mid-'80s. He has been one of my best and certainly most influential friends. 25 years ago, he married a girl that I did not like or trust. I told him as much, but he married her weird butt anyway. A few years ago, she ran off with a guy she met at a roller skating rink. He apparently wooed her with his zooming around or whatever, and Bill was single again. He met a girl and I insisted I meet her. Bill remembered that I had not approved of his ex. We met for lunch at one of those awful buffets. The girl was beautiful. She used English like a scalpel, working on a PhD. She was awesome. But I noticed little things about her. She had obviously been to finishing school. Then why did she have fingernail polish on her cuticles and a dress from a 1985 resale rack? There were just a lot of details that didn't add up, and Bill was getting ready to marry her. I told Bill that I thought she was hiding something, but I didn't care. This gal was high class and high bred. I told him she was great. Bill hadn't met her parents till the wedding. It was at their beach house in Destin. It turns out that my friend hadn't told his new bride of his formidable wealth, but she had been hiding the fact that her parents are legit billionaires. Bill deserves someone like her.
And I wish Bill all the happiness in the world.
I have one that is straight out of a goddamn soap opera, and I'm fully ready to accept people calling bullcrap on it, but I'm gonna tell it anyway. I was very good friends with a guy in high school named John who was dating a lovely guy named Jenny, Polish or something. I can't recall, but that's sort of irrelevant. And was madly in love with him. He carried Jenny's picture around in his wallet, and every time they were together, they were super sweet. Really adorable couple. Then, one day, Jenny starts acting really strange and distant. Doesn't answer John's phone calls, doesn't spend time with us, the whole works. He flat out broke up with John and broke the poor guy's heart. I bought a spare t-shirt for a few days because my shoulder would be soaked from him crying on it. And then it got even worse. John called me one afternoon after school and begged me to come over because he needed a friend. When I got there, he told me that Jenny had been killed in a car accident and he was absolutely devastated all over again. I went with him to the funeral a few days later for moral support and he was just broken. Spent a couple of weeks just moping and being depressed, and here comes the plot twist. Are you ready for this crap? He gets a frickin' call from Jenny. He had a twin brother that we never knew about who was apparently a big troublemaker, and he had been sent off to boarding school. When he'd be home to visit last, they'd swap places for some reason that I never found out. Either simply for love or for some other reason I never knew, but they did. His twin was the one that had been avoiding John and broke up with him, and he had been drinking and doing illegal substances before he got into the accident that killed him. Jenny had been off at boarding school, so he wasn't able to make it back for the funeral, and when he did get home, he had to work up his nerve for a few days to tell his parents what they'd done, which led to them realizing that the child they thought was dead was actually alive, and vice versa, which led to some
fun family complications, not the least of which being obituary retractions, headstone replacements, and lots of screaming apparently. Meanwhile, John and him had a whirlwind romance afterwards and a giddy fit of reunited bliss, but it fizzled out after a month or so because John was furious after the reality sank in at what Janny had done without telling him and letting him be so miserable all that time. Not to mention letting him think that he died. I was the third-party observer in all this, but to this day, it's probably the most unbelievable thing that's ever happened in my life. Well, this just had everything. Illegal substances, alcohol, romance, identical twins. Yeah, they're right, it is straight out of a goddamn drama.
Told this before and will again. I was a little goth girl in high school and secretly had a mad crush on an upperclassman that was a wrestler and did cross country. My cousin, who was Little Miss Socialite, also had a crush on him and hit on him constantly. He and I were complete opposites. We rode the same bus and I was pretty sure I was invisible to him. So one day, his friends start picking on me. He gets up from the front of the bus, moves to where his buddies and I are sat, and sits down next to me, throws his arm around me, and they stop. This annoys the hell out of my cousin as he and I become friends, and he constantly ignores her advances. She later goes on to have me expelled by saying I had a bomb and was going to blow up the school because she didn't like this or that her BF and I were close friends. This ruined every friendship I had except the one with my and her crush. He and I remained friends even after he moved away, and then closer friends when he moved back. Today, he and I are going on 4 years together. We bought a house and car, had a daughter, and are working on plans to build our next and probably permanent home. 10 years later, that B-word is still greener than a Granny Smith apple.
Little did the cute AF goth girl's cousin know is that when she accused her of being a literal terrorist, it only made him want her more. Had a child with a woman I didn't love. Gave up my entire life to move states to try and give it a go. Became depressed and made the decision to move back home after realizing it just wasn't working. She filed for child support and thus began the gauntlet of her parents reminding me of how I abandoned my son and family and that I was a piece of crap. Ex wouldn't let me talk to my son unless I paid child support plus additional expenses, which I did because what did I know about being a father at 23? Still made monthly drives to see my son because I loved him. She became increasingly addicted to illegal substances and moved my son from state to state, turning to family members she could leech from. Parents told me I would never see my son again because I don't deserve him. I sued for sole custody, and I'm currently owed $60,000 in back child support and lawyer fees. She's been held in contempt 4 times, and we have a compliance hearing coming up on the 10th. She doesn't attempt to speak to my son, now 6. He wasn't yet 4 the last time they spoke, and current girlfriend of 5 years is referred to as Mom.
You know, good for this guy. He seems to have gone through a lot of personal suffering and well chuffed that he persevered and now happier than ever. Hell yeah.
I worked in morning radio and I was also an accomplished bowler. One day I mentioned something about a high score I had and a listener called in and challenged me because he had just bowled a perfect game the week before. We worked out the details, and since we had the same first name, I said the loser has to legally change their name for 1 year to whatever the winner wants. We had an attorney ready to donate time for the paperwork. The guy refused to agree to those terms. He was up for anything but wouldn't do the legal name change. So we decided that the loser gets a tattoo of the winner's choosing. My idea was better, but I digress. So the challenge was set. 1 game the next day for the tattoo. Our studio was next to a bowling alley, so we were able to set it up so that we started in the studio in the first hour of the show, bowled in the second hour, and got the tattoo in the third hour. I designed my tattoo and got it to an artist. She made a stencil so she could tattoo fast and make for better radio. I threw the first 9 strikes in a row. He missed a spare in the first. I didn't even finish the game. I would have had somewhere between a 269 and a perfect game. He couldn't even score higher than 200. So we go and get the tattoo on this guy like 10 minutes after I embarrassed him on live radio. The tattoo is me writing Falcor. I green screened myself in the Atreyu pose and photoshopped me into the actual movie poster. The artist had a perfect stencil made. The tattoo is finished and the detail is unbelievable. We all have a great laugh and I only see this guy one other time in my life. Plot twist. The last I heard, he was in jail for graping minus the G a 13-year-old. His second grape conviction. He couldn't legally change his name because he was a registered SX offender. So there is a child grapist in prison somewhere with a tattoo of me writing Falcor on his bicep. I'm the only person in the world with that story.
That may very well be true. You may be the only person in the world with that story, but I believe the world is an incredibly large place with some overlap and reoccurring events, so maybe not.
When I was around 8, I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy and some severe heart issues. Everyone kind of just assumed I would die any day after that. Well, come 8 years later, I was still here and my doctor pretty much gave up on figuring out what is wrong with me, so my parents decided to get a second opinion. We went to Mayo Clinic and I was easily diagnosed with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, something that is easily treated through exercise. In my case, post varies a lot and can be much more difficult to fight for others. The opposite of what my doctors told me to do. After that, I was just like, crap, now I have to plan my future.
See, this is a real plot twist, because some people in this, I swear, have taken the idea and gone, oh, my life taking a very sudden and extreme change is a plot twist. No, this is a plot twist. A good one at that.
I will try to keep this as short as possible. My grandfather left my grandmother for another man after 35 years of marriage and the raising of 2 kids, a daughter, Mom, and a slightly mentally disabled son, Drunkle. It messed my grandmother up pretty bad. Fast forward 16 years, my mom dies from liver failure. Me and my kid sister are young and broke. Grandmother is old and broke. Grandfather pays for everything. Nobody says anything to him. No thanks, no condolences, nothing. I want to go see him and talk to him, thank him, and see how he's doing. I asked my grandmother where he lives on the grounds that he told me he had something important he needed to tell me. Pulled out of my butt, obviously, but grandmother bursts into tears and confesses that grandfather is not my mom's real father. She had a whirlwind romance with some traveling jackass con man who left her as soon as he could. Grandfather offered to marry grandmother and raise my mom as his own. Mom never knew. I was stunned. My grandmother was always really judgmental of other people and looked down on anyone else in this exact situation. She was sobbing at this point, and I snapped at her to stop because blood never really played all that heavily into what me and my sister considered family that she shouldn't consider it either. Anyway, that's how I found out one of my family's biggest secrets on accident and then promptly didn't give a crap. Neat plot twist, though.
People really enjoy the phrase whirlwind romance in this topic.
TLDR, big misunderstanding leads to big love. I'll share my grandma's, one of my favorites. As a young woman, she worked at a humble bakery in a small town in Australia. American soldiers were stationed in her town as they readied for deployment in the Pacific War of World War II. One day, a soldier from New York City came in and tried to order something not on the menu. His accent was very thick and she, being a Scottish immigrant, could not understand him. She was very embarrassed, but kept trying to assist him. After a couple minutes like this, the soldier got very impatient and started cussing and insulting my grandmother, the bakery, the town, etc. Well, my grandmother, a proud woman of small stature but surprising strength, came around the counter and punched that man hard in the chest. I'm told she broke one of his ribs, but that seems extreme. She definitely knocked him over. Fellow soldier lifted the stunned soldier off the ground and back to the base where they told their CO the story. The CO panicked about ruining relations with the town and pointed to the nearest man. He asked where he was from. Illinois, and hearing no action, sent him back to the bakery to apologize on behalf of the army. The man did a wonderful job and made a good impression and went back to that town after the war, and he married my grandma, and they lived happily ever after. They eventually moved back to the States, but she refused to ever visit New York City.
Ah, Americans, never will they understand not to mess with a bonny little Scottish lady. That's a sweet story, though. TLDR, thought I was starting a new life and I did, but not the one I thought I would. I moved from California to Chicago after a year of doing nothing after finishing school. Lived with a friend for a bit, then found an apartment in the city with some roommates. Got a perfect job in the field I went to school for. Almost 2 months to the day after I moved into the city, I went on a date that ended in me getting meningococcal meningitis. Spent 2 weeks in a coma. 2 months in a Chicago hospital, was sent back to California on a medical flight where I spent 5.5 more months in a hospital, lost 8 of my fingers and both of my legs, and now, 2.5 years later, I am still recovering with near constant setbacks. My God, went on a hot date. She presumably gave him the meningitis, not on purpose probably, but yeah, that's how you contract it, through saliva, spit, respiratory secretions and all that stuff, you know. And lost his legs, lost his fingers, just had to stay in a hospital for a long time. The coma? This is a man who has suffered. This is what I'm talking about when I say to people, yeah, you can be plucked from existence or anything can happen to you at any time. Gah!
I never really knew my father growing up. Sadly, he lived right next door for most of my adolescent life. There is exactly one time I remember him acknowledging me. I was standing on my front porch and he was going up the steps and into his. I was a kid. I waved, he waved back. That is the only contact I remember with my father as a child. Still though, I've always wondered about him. It hasn't really ever been about anger or anything, but more so why he chose not to want me. I've wondered about him for over 15 years. Way back in the day, they released a bike called the Sonic 6. It was a glorified Huffy with a big blue shield on the front and a gear stick in the dead center to change gears. I got it for my birthday, and of course, I was ecstatic. That thing was so cool. As luck would have it, as I was riding with a friend, a guy walking past me the opposite way cold-cocked me and knocked me straight off the bike. I got sucker punched like you wouldn't believe. The dude was huge, like obese huge. I was a kid. How powerful was I? The guy simply jumped on my brand new bike, told me to stay down and pedaled off. I chased him, but I didn't get very far. He was gone in a flash. 15 years later, I learned that my real father had paid that guy to beat me up and steal my bike as a revenge tactic against my mother. I mean, what kind of person does that? What kind of father does that? Sad, really. Another tad bit I wanted to throw in. I mentioned how the dude decked me and just rode off with the bike. Multiple sources had confirmed that he had actually paid the dude to beat the crap out of me. Like hit me while I'm about out for the count type of thing. The guy used to hang out with his friend right across the street. A few weeks after my bike was stolen, they started riding it up and down the street in front of me. Except they had broken off the left-hand side of the handlebars. I remember the shield used to flap back and forth as they went flying down the street on it. How is that for some bullcrap?
What a despicable, vindictive individual to pay someone to beat up your son and steal his bike because you don't like the mom. What? What's their father's name? Stan Smith? Does he work for the CIA? Because that's the kind of thing that he would do. Well, maybe not actually, because Stan Smith would probably do it himself.
What is the dumbest but 100% serious thing that someone has said to you? My sister thought diet pills were low-calorie pills. Her actual quote was, "Wait, diet pills aren't for losing weight? They're not just a healthier version of regular pills?" Is it bad that I understand how she could get confused? You stupid idiot. How can there be shadows on the moon if there's no gravity? Working in retail and a customer came up to me and said in a very angry tone, "What is that noise? You need to tell your manager to fix whatever that is." That's rain. It's raining outside, lady. I will say, when I worked at a big warehouse store, when it rained hard, it was pretty loud. We were in a car and an ambulance passed us with its lights on. My friend turned to me with a very serious look on her face and asked, "If you were a blind and deaf car driver, how could you know how to pull over for the ambulance?" That became her senior quote. I had a similar thought the other day. My younger sister asked me why ambulances have flashing lights. I said that it was to get the attention of drivers, especially those that may be deaf. I then thought to myself, the loud sirens must be to get the attention of blind drivers. You would think that blind driving is an obvious no-no, right? Well, I learned recently that blind people can legally get a license to carry, which is pretty wild to me. My then 16-year-old sister once told me while cutting an onion, "God, why did they put the paper on these onions so tight?" She actually thought the skin of an onion was some kind of wrapper. I used to work in a kitchen and one of the pot washers was cleaning a slicer and not exactly being careful. I told him the correct way to do it so he didn't chance cutting any of his fingers. With a straight face and being completely serious, he told me that he didn't care if he cut his fingers off. It would just grow back, like a starfish. "Hi, is this the Krusty Krab?" "No, this is Patrick." I was once told that substance dogs at the airport, schools, etc. were addicted to the substance they were looking for, so each airport had a different dog for each substance. This person was a university graduate. They were probably really wasted while watching that episode of Family Guy where Brian becomes a substance-sniffing dog and gets addicted to a certain powder. I bet they saw that episode on TikTok and then there was Subway Surfer and someone cutting soap next to it. This happened last night at the bar I work at. I get a ticket for 2 Chardonnays, one with ice. All right, one with ice. And one as it's supposed to be. There we go. 3 minutes later, in storms a lady with 2 wine glasses in her hand. "Look at this." She says, and somewhat slams the glasses onto the bar. I am a little shocked that the glasses didn't break, and I did as I was told. I looked at the glasses. Yes, one Chardonnay with ice and one without. What's the matter, ma'am? I ask. Why did she get more wine than me? She asked, annoyed. More wine? I ask. There's not more in either one. Both have 120 milliliters exactly, as it's supposed to be. Would you like some ice too? But that one is fuller, and she points at the one with ice. Yes, it has ice in it, I reply. Why does she get more wine with the ice? Why don't I get more wine? Look, this one has that much more wine. Showing the difference between the glasses by pinching her fingers. Well, you get where this is going. This lady didn't understand that if you fill 2 glasses of wine and add ice to one, the ice will make it look fuller. But it's just because the ice takes up space. I had to literally show her that it's just the ice making it look like the glass is fuller, which it of course was, but didn't have more wine. Even then, I think she still thought she was being mistreated. When you have to explain Archimedes' freaking principle to an irate customer, you should win a prize. Doing so sounds frustrating enough in a normal setting. Now picture a crowded bar, 2 rows of people waiting to order drinks, a ticket machine spitting out orders from the terrace and the seating area. But damn, I wanted to end this lady. In the end, I took out the ice from the glass, told her, look, the same. Now I add the ice, just the ice, and there you go. I didn't add more wine, did I? And then she sorta agreed and sat her butt back down. Still don't think she trusted me on the there is no more wine in it part. If I ever open up a service-based business, I figure each of my employees should get 1 F off per year of service. It will be well advertised to our customers that if you are the lucky recipient of said F off, you should assume that you're the worst customer that employee has dealt with in the last year. And you should ban yourself from the premises. While working at my first library job, there was this young college girl, I'm assuming freshman, who came into the public library for some books for class. She seemed to be doing fine, so I leave her alone until she repeatedly makes very frustrated noises, so I offer my help. Can I help you find something? I need the Korean Bible. The Bible in Korean? Yes. We might have that in the international collection. Follow me. I go to said collection and do not find the Bible in Korean. I offer her the Bible in other languages or a novel in Korean. On seeing the text of the Korean novel, she looks very confused. No, this isn't it. I need the Korean Bible. Right, so you basically need the Bible written in the Korean language. No, I need the Korean Bible. It's like the Bible, but it's in Arab. Me trying not to facepalm. Do you perhaps mean the Quran? This is also the same job where my 6-year-old boss asked me what pitcher and catcher meant on a gay blog she happened upon. And when I explained, she very cheerfully walked away saying, well, 'tis better to give than receive. Heard 2 girls talking on the bus to my class. Girl 1, let's go to Hawaii this summer. Girl 2, I wish. I don't like to fly though. Girl 1, it's fine. I think the bridge is almost finished. We can just drive. These girls were students at a university. Okay, so after reading this, I instantly Googled how long that drive would be if a bridge existed, and I found this comment. Okay, I'll bite. I'm not gonna take the it's impossible end of story route here. We all know that's true. Assume, despite all the engineering challenges, someone found a way to safely build a bridge between San Francisco and Honolulu that didn't bankrupt the United States in the process. Consider that it is roughly 2,400 miles between San Francisco and Honolulu. That's roughly the same distance between San Francisco and Detroit. And Google Maps says that it'll take 35 hours to get there, without rest stops or meal stops or hotel stops. Assuming the highway is built to federal interstate standards, I would imagine it would take about that long to get there, again, without stops. Probably about 4 days or so if they actually built rest stops on the bridge. But if you had one bad accident on that bridge, I would expect the time to multiply exponentially. So when is the tow truck gonna get here? AAA says sometime tomorrow. A friend thought human specimen plus store-bought chicken egg equaled a live creature. But in reality, it's just really salty scrambled eggs. Excuse me, can you tell me where Half Dome is? I was outside the Ahwahnee in Yosemite and just pointed at it. Is it behind the mountain? The mountain is Half Dome. Oh, I thought Half Dome was a rock. It's a really big rock. The sad thing is I know Yosemite employees get questions like this all the time. In the valley, I only carry my climbing ropes inside a rope bag, so people don't ask me questions like this nearly as much. knew a pathological liar in high school, told everyone she was allergic to peanuts and forbade anyone to have peanuts even in the same room as her. One day I saw her eating Reese's peanut butter cups and my friends and I said, "Aren't you deathly allergic to peanuts?" To which she replied, "They use different kinds of peanuts in Reese's that I'm not allergic to." My grandma said she was allergic to peanuts, yet ate peanut butter all the time. She said it was the solid texture of peanuts that made her allergic. I mean, I loved my grandparents, but what the hell? I know all about pathological liars. I used to work with a guy that said he couldn't wear silver watches because his sweat melted them, and if he wore a gold watch, it would make the watch spin out of control like a time travel movie effect. A customer brought in an iPhone with standing water in it. I showed them and explained that is why the phone is no longer turned on. He proceeded to yell at me in front of other customers. "I have a PhD and I can guarantee you water does not do things like that to electronics." I said, "All right," and just returned his phone to him. It's obvious that his supposed PhD degree was a blanket response to any verbal conflict, but even if he did have a PhD, how exactly would that make him qualified in other subjects than the one he studied? Maybe his PhD stood for pretty huge dent in his head. A friend was totally confident he would be able to survive a plane crash because of his tuck and roll technique. He was 100% sober. Until probably 12 or 13 years old, I was pretty confident I could jump before hitting the ground, in the case of a plummeting elevator or plane crash. I was sure that I could survive a flood no problem if I just put on pull floaties on my arms. I drove past an IKEA dealership the other day with my wife, and she just started freaking out. She yelled, "When did that get there? Can we go?" Then she got really quiet and looked away. I paused and then realized what happened and say, "You thought that was IKEA, yeah?" We've driven past that dealership almost every day for over a year. Marriage, a lifetime of one person saying stupid stuff for the other to mock them about it, and vice versa. It's beautiful. When my husband and I were still dating, we were watching TV and a commercial for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button movie came on. About a minute after it was over, we had the following conversation. Him, "So is that real?" Me, "Is what real?" Like, do people get the disease that Benjamin Button had? Are you asking if people are born old and then age into babies? Yeah, you're right. Never mind. Forget I asked. I have never forgotten that he asked. I've been a cook for 15 years. One time a server asked me to rush a chicken breast she forgot to ring in. I said, "Okay, it'll be a few minutes. It's still a bit raw." "Just give it to me, it's fine," she says. I tell her that I don't feel like giving anyone salmonella poisoning today and she will have to wait. Her jaw drops and her face turns red. She rather belligerently shouts just to give it to her because she's losing tip money. Then adds, "Besides, people don't get salmonella poisoning from chickens, they get it from salmon. You're a cook, you should know that by now." Every person in the room did the slow neck turn of "what the hell did I just hear?" and just stared at her. Dude, it's not a jokey matter. Chickenella poisoning is serious. I used to work at Best Buy and I had a customer, lady in her 30s, come in with her plasma television on a flat cart. She says, "I need the plasma refill." So I give her the old customer service fake laugh because I thought it had to be a joke. But the look on her face and the pissed tone showed me that she was serious. I took her to the home theater department, and from a distance I can hear her going off about plasma refill prices. Or shouldn't the warranty cover the plasma? I used to work at a plasma donation clinic. For those who aren't aware, it's part of your blood. And at the place I worked, it was used specifically to help people with immune disorders. We would tell people this when it was their first time. And there's posters all over the place about specific kinds of people it helped. I had someone who was donating ask if there was any way to track his plasma so that he could buy the TV that it was used in. These stories just made me look up at the old plasma TV I have hanging on my wall. My uncle once said, "The earth is flat and the edges are covered with heavy layers of snow that no one can cross." He also said that the moon landing was fake, gravity is fake, and airline companies are in on a conspiracy and so much more. It was a very fun argument, I'll tell you that. You can't reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. Wait, gravity is fake? I'm curious how that uncle explained why we aren't all floating around then. A girl I once had to work with kept bringing bottles of Pepsi frozen solid to work. One day I finally asked why she freezes them, and she says you take away all the carbs by doing it. You remove all the carbohydrates by removing the carbonation. That chick was dense. You should have played along. If you remove all the carbon, it isn't organic anymore. I had a guy in a pub, completely adamant to the point of red-faced anger, swearing on the Bible that you could see New York from the Dongle Coast on a good clear day. I was in tears laughing. For those who have no idea what the Dongle Coast was, like myself, it is apparently in Ireland. A woman can become pregnant from touching a man's hands. Grade school teacher in Argentina. A woman stopped me in the grocery store when I was in my early teens to tell me that I could cure my acne by rubbing lady juice all over it. I assure you, she was dead serious. Before finding out that the woman was serious, I was curious if that was some form of flirting. It didn't happen to me firsthand, but a friend from New Mexico was asked while in another state if they spoke English, if they needed a passport to visit the US, and if the water is drinkable in New Mexico. I live in New Mexico. I get those questions a lot when I go even a couple of states away. It's more common than you'd think. Well, I live in a state where cowboys are really popular, and when I travel, I've met people who are surprised that I drive a car and not ride a horse everywhere. Do you know how expensive it is to take care of a horse? My stepmom, as she ripped the bandage off my sister's 3rd-degree burn. It just needs fresh air. She then made my sister clean the chicken coop with a large, now exposed burn wound. Of course it got infected, almost killed my sister. She recovered, thankfully. Another gem from the same woman, while scolding us for getting bored and asking to leave after 4 hours in a museum, we could have gone to see Lewis and Clark's first plane. With my extensive experience with fairy tales, it tells me that your stepmom is trying to kill you. Watch out for any friendly woodsmen, and make sure you always carry rocks with you. And of course, know where the local dwarves are. Also, only eat apples that are uniformly colored. My brain automatically went to, don't touch my exposed area, stepmom. I really need to get off the internet. Years ago, while working at a cafe, a couple came up to me and asked me if Saddam Hussein was Russian. The Iraq War had just begun, so I snickered and said, of course not. The boyfriend turned to his girlfriend with a smug, victorious look and said, see, I told you he was German. If you're not Russian, you're obviously German. I don't see how they got that wrong. I've posted this before on Reddit at some point, but it's perfect for this question. My college assigns emails with your first initial, middle initial, then last name. So my email ended up being Dr. Last Name at college, as my first and middle initials are D and R. I jokingly told 2 dudes that I was with and how people I email think I'm a doctorate. One of them got up to go to the bathroom, and the other one was real quiet for a few seconds and then said, so did you work for the school over the summer? How did you become a doctor? It was the first week of freshman year, and I was 18. I had one quirky professor who would refer to all of his students as Doctor, their last name, in class. After that semester ended, I kept running into former classmates while hanging out with friends, and they would always call me Doctor, my last name. I also worked on campus as a tutor, so while out drinking with friends, I would hear some guy yelling, Dr. OP, hey! And my friends would say, wait, you have a PhD? And I would say, no, it's just some crazy guy. Then the guy would come up to me and say how much I helped him learn math and how I'm an awesome teacher. After he left, my friends were convinced that I was a math teacher with a PhD, and for some reason I was lying about it. This was reinforced each time we saw another one of my classmates, and they'd do the same thing. Hey now, superheroes aren't the only people that need secret identities. Teachers need them nowadays too. My mom worked at a credit union and had a member ask if she could deposit cash through the mobile deposit. My old roommate when choosing from a bowl of candy. I've decided I'm gonna go with Starburst instead of Twix because the fruit is healthier than chocolate. She was dead serious. Here in the UK, we got a lot of American kids shows, especially big ones like SpongeBob, Animaniacs, etc. These shows normally have the 4th of July special about the Declaration and War of Independence. With that as a topic of conversation, this is the genuine discussion I had with someone when I was 14. Me. The Simpsons made a joke about that during episode of 4th of July I forgot the name of. Friend. Yeah, I watched that one. The British sound like jerks. Me, slow blinking. Come again? You know, the British. The guys they always talk about when they do those kind of specials. I bet we could take them. Me again. Daniel, what country do we live in? Friend. England? Cue very quick explanation of British geography, with Daniel refusing to believe he was British until he went home and asked his mum. You should get off your tablet while it's storming. Lightning could travel through the Wi-Fi and shock you. My mother. I was once making small talk with an acquaintance, and I told her that I had flown out to visit my family in Korea over the summer. She got this smug grin on her face and said, you can't fly to Korea, it's an island. My son was born on February 29th. Woman asked me if he needed to have 5 actual birthdays before starting kindergarten, or if he could still go when he was 5 years old. My friend said this once, "I don't worry about the price of gas going up. I only ever put $20 in at a time." Evolution isn't real. We just hatched out of eggs one day. A girl at my school. I used to work at a call center for a wireless service provider. A woman called in inquiring about how much we charged to use her phone while she was traveling internationally. I said it depends on the country and asked where she was headed. As serious as can be, she responds with, "Wyoming." I barely got to my mute button before I erupted in laughter. And in case you're curious, I did not mishear her, nor was she calling from outside the US. I clarified with her. She legitimately thought Wyoming was a different country. Plus, if you could hear how she talked and stuff, you literally wouldn't even give her the benefit of the doubt. When I was in China, some guy asked me if I wanted to learn English. I told him that I live in Canada, so I already know English. He was curious why I spoke English in Canada instead of Canadese. About a year ago, dude flipped open his flip phone during the daytime and started taking a picture of the moon that was clearly visible. We lock eyes before he snaps the photo and he says to me, "This happens only once every hundreds of years." I just kept walking. One night I was working at T-Bell. This girl comes through the drive-thru absolutely hammered. She was destroyed. She kept yelling at us to give her French fries. I just kept telling her that we don't sell French fries. Finally, my manager comes over and gives her the side of Fiesta potatoes and says these are Mexican French fries. I almost cried laughing so hard. And in case you're curious, yes, we did report her for driving wasted. Sometimes it depends on the manager working, but we usually report all wasted drivers at Taco Bell. I hate to be that guy, but Taco Bell does actually serve French fries. It's those nacho fries or whatever they're called. I was giving tours at my college geology museum. An older woman asked me to show her around. I was showing her our best showpieces when we got to this large quartz crystal. She then proceeds to ooh and ah, and showed me that one of the facets of the peak had 7 edges. She then tells me that she could channel spirits through the crystal's facet and began speaking in tongues. I walked away and asked if anyone else would like a tour. In middle school, took a road trip with my best friend and her parents from the Midwest to Disney World in Florida. They had family in Georgia, so we stopped for a visit on our way through. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to enter their trailer because I was a northerner. They were eventually convinced to let me in when I told them that I was born in New Mexico, which wasn't a state during the Civil War, so therefore, I was technically not a northerner. It blows my mind that there are still people like this in America. While driving, I see windmills across the hilltops and point them out. My girlfriend, "Oh, cool! Why did they need to make wind though?" She's a special one.
What's the most fitting case of vigilante justice you've ever heard of?
The man's name was Ken Rex McElroy. He terrorized a small town he lived in for years. He was accused of regularly stealing from his neighbors, stuff like livestock, gasoline, and antiques, robbery, harassing, assaulting, graping women, 2 as young as 12, destroying property, including burning down his wife's parents' house when she tried to leave him, assault, including shooting at least 2 people. He was charged with various crimes at least 3 times a year, but he had an incredible lawyer. Man was only ever charged with anything once. He used to intimidate witnesses against him by following them or parking outside their homes and watch them until they were too scared to testify against him. That one time he was charged, by the way, he shot a grocer in the neck with a scatter shooty bang bang. For that he was given a charge of 2nd-degree assault. Max 2-year sentence. But he appealed, of course, and got out on bail. So he goes into a bar and loudly threatens to murder said grocer who survived the shooting to the neck, by the way. All that did was get his trial pushed back. Anywho, the town had a meeting. Then a big group of them went to the bar where Ken liked to drink and shot him in the goddamn head. I have actually been aware of the Kevin Rex McElroy story for a really long time. I watched Count Dankula's Mad Lads video on it, and honestly, a lot of his Mad Lads videos are so fun and interesting to watch. But this raises an interesting question of if there is a general menace to society going about doing things on repeat and the police, the justice system, what have you, aren't doing their job, should the general populace just put up with it? I mean, I should hope this isn't a controversial statement to make, but I really have zero respect, tolerance, or sympathy for rapists, murderers, or anything of that ilk, to be honest. And if an individual does come along and this person decides to fool around and find out and that person does something about it when no one else did, when the police didn't bother, when the justice system did not do what it's supposed to do, then frankly, life moves on.
Another case, Yaku Yadav. To quote the Wikipedia article, he was an Indian gangster, robber, home invader, kidnapper, serial rapist minus the G, extortionist and serial killer. He terrorized a poor slum to the point nearly every single woman in this community had been assaulted by him, and the daughters were just kept inside. He never got in trouble though because he bribed the police and only targeted Dalits. Basically, the untouchable caste in India. Seriously, the list of crimes is horrifying, just skimming the article. It all came to a head when he turned his attention on a young woman who was studying to go to college and help the community. She stood up to him, and it ended with her threatening to blow up her house if they broke in. She called the police during the standoff, but they never came. That was the last straw for the neighbors. A mob formed and chased off his men by stoning them and then burning down his house, and he went to the police to get himself arrested for his own protection. When they took him to the court for trial, a mob was waiting and he actually threatened them. The police did nothing. More than that, one of his accomplices tried to pass him a knife, and the police only stepped in after the mob protested that. The next day, he was attacked and beaten, but he was rescued by the police. The police had no intention of actually punishing him and set up his bail hearing in another city. Hundreds of women marched from the slums armed with knives and chili powder, and well, I think I'll just quote the Wikipedia article. Yadav was then lynched by the mob of 200 to 400 women who showed up. He was stabbed at least 70 times and chili powder and stones were thrown in his face. The chili powder was also thrown into the faces of police officers who guarded him. The police officers, overwhelmed and terrified, fled immediately. One of his alleged victims also hacked off his penis. The lynching occurred in Nagpur District Court No. 7 on the marble floor of the courtroom. As he was being lynched, Yadav was horrified and shouted, "Forgive me. I won't do it again." The women passed their knives around and kept stabbing him. Each woman agreed to stab Yadav at least once. The mob continued attacking his corpse post-mortem. Yep, one of the most brutal lynchings ever. If you think it wasn't justified, I'll quote one more part from the Wikipedia article about his arrival at the court, which I think sums up his character quite well. Yadav walked in and was confident and unrepentant. At about 2:30 to 3 p.m. when Yadav appeared, he saw a woman he had assaulted. Yadav mocked her, called her a prostitute, and said he would do it to her again. The police laughed. Even when faced with a mob of his victims, he was still mocking them. This monster only felt remorse when he was literally about to die. And worse, the police laughed. If that mob had any lingering doubts, that moment definitely 100% made it clear that the police would not do anything to ever see Yadav face actual justice. 100% justified vigilante justice at its finest. I'm not a man of faith, I have limited understanding of Hinduism, but I hope this man is suffering in Naraka for all eternity, and before you say Naraka is not a place of permanence for sinners, AmITheA has a different opinion on that. But here's the thing, it's not even just a problem with Aku Yadav himself. Screw that guy to the deepest depths of Naraka, or the police, or any of his associates. It's also the frickin' caste system, which is surprisingly still pretty prevalent in their society today. I mean, this guy died in 2004. Grady Stiles Jr., aka Lobster Boy. He was an incredibly abusive husband and father. His daughter and her boyfriend actually pretended she was pregnant so they could get married and she could leave the house. The day before the wedding, he shot the boyfriend in the back 3 times, killing him. He actually confessed at the trial and was found guilty of third-degree murder. However, the jail wasn't equipped to deal with his condition. He required a wheelchair due to his condition, and so he was instead sentenced to 15 years probation. He went back to being an abusive monster to his family, but it was even worse than before. He regularly reminded them he got away with murder once and he could do it again. Somehow, he convinced his first wife to remarry him during this time, which I'd say was the worst mistake mistake she ever made. In the end, his stepson and possibly his wife, though they all claim she had nothing to do with it, hired a fellow circus performer to murder him because his entire family believed he would murder her. I'm not exaggerating. In interviews for the ID show I saw about the case, every family member made it clear that if he lived, he most likely would have killed her at some point. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. His death is one of the only murders outside of self-defense that I think is 100% justified, because the justice system already failed once. He might have been sentenced and found guilty, but they just put him on probation and house arrest. He literally got away with murder. If he'd just gone to jail the first time, then his family wouldn't be so screwed up now. I feel so bad for the stepson. He just wanted to protect his mom, and now he'll be in jail for the rest of his life. I think that's one of the worst parts of this case. His wife, stepson, and the hired killer all got longer sentences than Styles' probation. That man never spent a day in jail for cold-blooded murder, and yet his wife and stepson are likely to rot in there for trying to protect themselves from him.
I'm going to say this hits very close to home, so I'm going to make this brief. Lobster Boy, you're a despicable piece of crap. I'd call you something else, but I'm not allowed to, or else I'll get a smack on the bum-bum by the producers.
In my hometown, we had a drunk named T. He was in his 60s when this happened. T was slightly mentally handicapped and always walked home from the bar. One night, a group of teenagers grabbed him and beat him with a crowbar. Miraculously, T lived. Once the names got out of who did the crime, they all got out because they were 16 with probation. A group of guys, most of them over 6 foot and big, found the boys one by one and beat the living tar out of them. Then many of us in town donated and paid all T's medical bills off, and the money raised paid for him to live in a nice apartment the rest of his life.
So I understand to some degree why young children and teenagers are defended or protected from the consequences of their own actions by the law, but in this case, beating a man with a crowbar in the street is nothing but savagery. Screw them kids. Otherwise, though, I'm glad that this actually had a happy ending rather than just getting revenge, because revenge is cool. Revenge is rad. Don't let The Last of Us 2 tell you otherwise. Revenge is the sickest thing you can ever achieve. I'm joking. Hands up anybody who has heard of the Derlevanga Brigade. This was a Nazi unit recruited from convicts and guys released from asylums and was so brutal that even other Nazis were disgusted by their atrocities. Their particular forte was massacring defenseless Slavic civilians, including murdering an entire kindergarten full of kids with bayonets. Evil Schweißkerl, to say the least. Their leader was a convicted rapist, sadist, and all-round unstable thug, Oskar Derlevanga. After the war, he was captured by the French and imprisoned, where he reportedly died of war wounds. What is more likely is that some payback happened. Remember how Derlevanga loved slaughtering Slavs? Derlevanga's guards happened to be Polish. I suspect this choice of guards was entirely deliberate. The result was that Derlevanga got beaten to death. I have nothing to say except they are an actual factual Nazi, and I don't really care or feel bad about anything that happens to them.
This is nowhere near the severity of most of these stories, but since it was close to home, when my daughter was in high school, she was tall and very attractive. She got a lot of attention from boys. One in particular was a jerk. Scott would not leave or take no for an answer. He would harass her because she had no interest in him. But she is very independent and never complained to us. She has always taken care of her own business. One day between classes, she stopped to get a drink of water. She stood there for a minute chatting with her friends, and Scott, showing off for his idiot pals, slid on his back behind my daughter so he could take a look up her dress. When my daughter looked down, Scott starts saying something like, "She's wearing pretty pink panties today." My daughter, a star on the soccer team, kicked Scott very hard in the ribs. That evening I get a call from a man I have met, Scott's dad. They are in the ER. Scott has 2 broken ribs. I had no idea how this related to me. Then he told me that Scott told me that my daughter did this to him. I was expecting him to say he was going to sue me or something, but what he said was,
I questioned Scott as to what he did to get kicked and how he was in such a position. I found out why your daughter kicked him, and she should have kicked him a few more times. I will have him apologize in writing, and furthermore, he will be grounded, I say grounded, until the end of school. But if you will, apologize to your daughter for me. Of course, my wife and I had a talk with her, relayed the message, and told her not to withhold good news. I have a lot of respect for a dad who did the right thing. I would bet that Scott turned out to be a better man.
I certainly hope so as well that Scott turned out to be a better person. I know quite a few people who gave people, and even myself, a lot of crap in high school, and there'd be fights, insults would be tossed about and whatnot. And as a matter of fact, one of them that I know who I really, really disliked for a long time, was a snotty little brat for most of his life, has actually grown up to be a fairly respectable individual. TLDR, father gets ultimate revenge on a pedophile who'd raped his son and got away with it in court. Sorry this is long, but it requires an intro of some sort. Years ago, I remember my family watching Phil Donahue. Y'all remember him, right? He kind of set the standard for talk shows and doing it in an investigative manner. But he had standards and wouldn't allow a Jerry Springer-like atmosphere. He'd present something or someone with controversial ideas or ideologies, or have people famous because this or that happened, or the subject of sensationalist news stories, human interest stories, all sorts of things that he thoroughly educated people about. Then he'd let his audience have the floor to ask questions freely. Anyway, one episode was a man about 40s or so. He'd just been, I think, either acquitted or done some time. I don't remember that part. But he had a son that was raped by a pedophile, and his son had been forced to testify in court at maybe age 9 or 10 and had to give extremely horrible and graphic testimony retelling of what the man had done to him, to the point he got sick on the stand and began vomiting. It was obviously horrendous to have been forced to watch, being the boy's father and mother. Well, the pedo got a not guilty verdict for a lack of physical evidence, regardless of what the little boy had said on the stand, something that happens all too often. So the father, who was a religious man, and I think they were from Texas, if I'm not mistaken, broke into the pedo's home and basically, I guess, held him at shooty bang bang point and told him, "You and I are going to pray." He told the pedophile, "Yes, you and I are going to pray. You are going to ask God for forgiveness for what you did to my son, and I am going to ask him for forgiveness for what I am about to do to you," and blew his brains out. I was not very old myself, maybe 12 when I saw that episode, and it totally galvanized me, and I loved that show till it went off the air. Hoo-wee!
You're gonna ask God for forgiveness, and I'm gonna ask him to forgive me for what I'm about to do to you.
That is some action movie stuff, man. Say what you want about Texas, say what you want about Texan boys, but, oh man, when they want revenge, they get it. In Brazil, I have a resident for 2+ years. It is a common practice to cut off the fingers and hands of captured thieves. A lot of the time they will also get beaten, almost to death with planks, like 2x4s, etc. It is also common for them to take a bullet to the hand, leg, etc. Rapists, thieves, and others who are shunned are usually subject to this kind of torture. Many times they will be dismembered with a machete or disemboweled as well. Beheadings are common, but they will usually take place after the victim has went through some significant torture. I have personally seen an alleged rapist from Sao Paulo get captured by the victim's brother. The rapist was about 20 or so. The girl he raped was about 11. They caught him, beat him in the street, then took him in an alley and hacked him up with a machete. It really isn't hard, people. Just keep your dirty little hands to yourself.
I arrived to install some security and surveillance devices at a home in Phoenix several years ago and got the story straight from Brian Danielson. For those of you, like I was, that have no idea who this is, he goes by the stage name of Daniel Bryan and is/was a wrestler with the WWE and a one-time champion. I'll link the story, but it seems to have left out some of the best details that were relayed to me. Story goes
that he and his wife arrive home. His wife goes to the carport door to enter the house and locks eyes with someone in the house. She sees the man and another drop whatever they are holding and bolt out of the back door towards the alley that runs behind the house. Brian takes off running after them, vaults the fence in the backyard and sees the two men running in the opposite direction away from the house. He decides to chase one guy over the other. Not sure what helped decide that. He chases the guy for about a block as the guy had a good lead on him. He catches the guy in the front of someone's house and puts him in a headlock and holds him while the homeowner that witnesses the struggle calls 911. The police were quick to arrive as another homeowner had already called about the suspicious vehicle parked at the end of the alley that happened to belong to the would-be burglars. Even more impressive about this is that Brian had very recently undergone neck surgery and was still capable of chasing down and subduing someone intent on getting away. Pro wrestling may be scripted, but this dude was obviously more than capable of handling himself. Also, he and his wife, Brie Bella, were some of the nicest and down-to-earth celebrities that I have met in my line of work.
It's not hard, people. Just keep your sticky little fingers to your goddamn self. But anyway, this actually reminds me of the story about Dolph Lundgren. Apparently, supposedly, his Marbella home was being robbed by 3 different people. And for those of you who don't know who Dolph Lundgren is, Rocky IV, Ivan Drago, man was built different. Like I said, I'm not a man of faith or anything like that, but if God is real, he built Dolph Lundgren with the good stuff. Some people out there are just built female dog made. I can't say that word, so female dog made, but Dolph Lundgren is built different. So these 3 masked robbers are apparently robbing his house in Marbella or something. They've tied up his wife, but then upon seeing a family portrait and seeing that Dolph Lundgren is in said family portrait, suddenly fear for their lives, because what if Dolph Lundgren comes home? Oh man, don't say that, screw this. And they leave. They just drop everything and just leave immediately. And honestly, I don't blame them.
A man's son was abducted by his karate teacher and raped over quite a long period of time. The police caught him, and as they were bringing him through the airport, his father pretended to be on a payphone. When the rapist and police walked by, he turned around and shot the rapist in the head, killing him instantly. This was all caught live on the news. The father wasn't charged with murder. He received 5 years probation. Gary frickin' Plauché. I love this story. It's a horrible story. It's a horrible story when you get down to it because of the victimization of his son. And you see, the context behind it is that the karate instructor of the son was kind of sort of friends with the family to some degree, like they were on good terms, and then suddenly the kidnapping happened. He flew across the freaking country and stuff to get away, I think. And I think to a very large degree, Gary felt responsible for not being able to protect his son from this guy. So he took actions into his own hands and killed him. But his son actually made a really nice post about his father not too long ago. I remember liking and retweeting it. It went something along the lines of, a lot of people know his father for this thing, obviously, but here's what I knew my father as. He was a kind, gentle man, and there was a nice picture of him painting Easter eggs and stuff, I think. Rest in power, Gary, that's all I gotta say. Rest in frickin' power. I mean, you just did what any decent father would do if they found out something like that had happened to their child. Marvin Heemeyer, a.k.a. Killdozer. I linked the wiki for him, but he is an absolute legend. I will summarize what he did and why he did that. Be careful what you read about him, because not all of it is true. So Marvin owned a muffler repair shop. The town wanted to build a concrete factory. They offered him a very low amount of money for his property. He denied. He basically asked for $1 million. His only source of income was the shop, and if he lost it, he would be out of a job. They end up not buying his shop and building it right outside of his shop. In fact, it blocked the way he got from his house to his shop. Cue zoning disputes. He petitioned to no avail to get them to move it. Multiple times, may I add. Many other things added to his rampage. He was fined for many things from the city council, likely as revenge. In fact, they expected him to pay $80,000 to connect his shop to a sewer line that was too far away. After the factory was built, it was impossible for him to even connect it. The rampage. You have to know he did not kill anyone besides himself. He actually stopped in front of the buildings that had people in them to let them out. Some people claimed that he fired at police, but it was known he fired at propane tanks. He had a list of buildings to destroy, and he destroyed all of them. There was a local Catholic church and names of people who wronged him. We don't know if he planned to kill these people or why the church was there. In fact, he believed God willed him to do what he did, and that was the reason he wasn't given a wife or children, so he could do it without remorse for them. His tank was a bulldozer that he suited with armor, a foot thick in some places. He used metal and concrete using his welding skills to hold it together. He made 2 shooting holes, and it was resistant to explosions and small arms fire. In the end, after it stopped moving, he deleted himself with a shot in the head. It was estimated he did around $10 million worth of damage. Now, if you believe what he did was wrong, that is your opinion. The police didn't help him. The city council didn't help him. The mayor didn't. No one did. He took it into his own hands, which is what vigilante justice is. Killdozer.
I freaking love the Killdozer story. Another Mad Lad story from Count Dankula that people must watch. It is insane. This man was pushed to the utter limits by crap-eating bureaucrats. God, I hate bureaucrats.
What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've ever seen? My roommate refused to go with his family for spring break since there wasn't a flight with first class seats and only business class was available. He ended up taking the connecting flight that did have first class available while the rest of his family just took business on the direct flight. You gotta be comfortable, you know, business class, the new cattle class. Wouldn't exactly call it rich kid syndrome, but it took me a little while to get used to my GF's lifestyle. I grew up in a very working class family, with both parents working full time just for us to stay afloat. Went around my GF's house and saw a lady making food in the kitchen. You must be Mrs. Surname. Trying to be really polite, and I introduced myself to her family. That was actually their maid. It was awkward. Luckily, they're all really down to earth and stuff, cause turns out that her parents were basically homeless and living out of a storage space when they were my age. But her parents started up a little business and actually became really successful enough to support them. And they just kept growing. That makes sense. People who come from humble beginnings often turn out to become decent people when and if they get rich. The maid comment reminded me of this moment when I was traveling with my friends. For some context, I was the only Latino in the group of my mostly white friends, and on this trip we stayed at another friend's family's house. We woke up to an older Mexican woman cooking breakfast. She turned out to be their maid/cook, and this friend's mother said, "Oh my God, have you ever tried homemade tortillas? They are the best." My white friend slowly turns his head over to me, then back to the mom and says, "I'm pretty sure he has." I just smiled and she felt super embarrassed. It was a funny moment and she was super nice. The dude who relentlessly bullied me in school was also the son of one of the richest people in the city. One day a teacher caught him with his hands around my throat and I was pinned against a wall. We were both taken to the teacher's meeting room where it was explained to me that we should try to get along and that we should apologize to each other. Did I mention his dad also built the flashy new cafeteria for the school that year? He was caught on numerous occasions with me in some state of distress, and every time they found a way to make it both our problem. His dad pumped a lot of money into that school. He also flew his friends on his private airline to Manchester United games, so nobody stood up for me because they could lose their privileges. My saving grace was a lot of his mates in the early years of secondary school turned on him in the later years because he was such a jerk. But as you might tell, I'm still not over it. I feel this because I worked at a place that gave other people more chances than they deserved because that person knew people at the company. It's a crappy feeling when you get mistreated and no one has your back. Attended an international high school in Ho Chi Minh City where a lot of new wave millionaire kids live. The school was ridiculous, and a third of the kids were expats, perfectly lovely kids, and a third were local Vietnamese kids whose parents were working their butt offs to send them to this private school, and the other third were the millionaire kids. They would never hesitate to show off their mummy and daddy's wealth. They'd pull up to school in their Lamborghinis, Ferraris, etc. And if their Rolls Royce didn't come on time to pick them up from school, it would be a straight phone call to their other driver to come pick me up right now. They'd be such jerks 24/7 to the non-rich locals and constantly just bring up the most trivial things and complain about them. I'm literally not exaggerating here when I say this example. My maid bought me the wrong Louis Vuitton bag. I told her it was the tan brown one, not the light brown one. Ugh, I can't believe it. Now we have to send her on the jet to Shanghai to get another one. They all paid and used family connections to get into Harvard, Stanford, UPenn, etc. And even now constantly complain on Facebook and Instagram about how crap their resident hall food was. So they just hired some freaking personal chef or something. Mind you, these kids were the dumbest bunch I've ever seen. One of them literally was so clueless about the most basic facts, but still got into business management. Despised the lot of them. Glad I'm in Europe, far away from most of them. When I was in high school, if you just had a car that worked, you were popular. Group of rich high school kids in Montana out driving around, drinking. Found 2 combines, large farm tractor thingies, worth about $250,000 each, out in a wheat field. Decided to have a demolition derby. Got caught in the judge's chambers with the farmers who just wanted the damages reimbursed. The high-end family lawyers asked what the hell they were thinking when they did that. The response? Well, you can't put a price on a good time. Turns out that was the wrong answer. Man, this story ended on a cliffhanger. Did they go to jail? Did their family end up paying? I get enough incomplete stories from my anime. I don't need it on Reddit too. He was 25 when I knew him. His father owned the oil fields. He had credit cards that he used for anything and everything, that they paid the balance off every month. He never even kept track of what was charged on it. He just bought whatever caught his fancy. He openly and shamelessly admitted that he had offered his college professors money to give him passing grades. One day he was cranky about something and said, "I wish my parents would just die so I could have their money. Why should I have to wait?" Sounds like his parents should find out how he really feels and leave him with just $1 in the will. Back in high school, we were doing one of those icebreakers where you passed the beach ball around and whoever caught it had to answer the question their thumb landed on. Well, this kid who had proclaimed being rich numerous times before, talking about his parents owning a known pizza place and how he drives expensive sports cars, caught the ball, and his question was, if you won $1 million, what would you do with it? His response was somewhere along the lines of, $1 million wouldn't make any difference in my life. Thanks a lot, Brad. You just ruined the game. Stupid Brad, always messing things up. I once had a mom ask if I could open the back of our ambulance so her kid could see what was inside since he wanted to be a fireman. I'm a medic, not a firefighter. I agree as long as he doesn't touch anything. Of course, the second the door opens, the kid hops in and goes straight for our expensive monitor. I tell him no, that it's dangerous and it could break, to which he starts screaming, "I don't care, my mom will buy it." And the mom says, "It's fine, just let him play with it. If it breaks, I'll replace it." I had to physically pick him up and carry him out of the ambulance since she didn't try to control him. While this is happening, we get paged out for a call and this lady suggests that she could pay double our hourly rate if we just stay for a few more minutes, just so her little punk could explore/destroy more of our equipment. Get the hell out of here with that crap, lady. You're willing to delay an ambulance so you won't have to deal with your precious little Joey's tantrum? Unbelievable. What would have been funny is if the kid used the shock panels and he flew out of the ambulance. A very distant relative of ours, some weird branch off the family tree, offered her son a bribe of an entire apartment building if he finished his undergraduate accounting degree. I just went, huh? So you get an immediate investment after graduating and you can rent out a place for mega dollars? My significant other has a rich aunt and uncle with only one kid. When he graduated college, his gift was a complex that brings in enough money for this kid to retire on. But if you ask him, he's self-made. I will never understand how rich kids can claim to be self-made. Maybe it's them just wanting to try and fit in. I don't know about rich, but just spoiled. My cousin insisted on a $15,000 wedding ring and a $30,000 wedding. She and the groom made $25,000 a year combined. Her dad paid for everything. They divorced within 6 months. Looks like she wanted a wedding, not a marriage. I have a kid in my MBA cohort that outsources his work and projects to India. He barked and moaned when one of our professors gave him a C when he only showed up to 2 classes after his dad donated $10,000 to the school. Overall nice guy, but doesn't have a clue. Had this one kid who dramatically threw down his smartphone on the ground in a mock frustration. Broken phone was replaced with few to no questions. I did that, but with an old flip phone so it didn't break. Got a few laughs when the battery flew out, and more when I picked it back up and it still worked. I chucked it halfway across the football field once, and that thing stayed intact. I went to middle/elementary school with some very wealthy people. Typically, I was oblivious enough to not realize it, but 2 instances come to mind. In 5th grade, we did an exchange trip type of thing with some kids in Canada. On the flight over there, one of the classmates said, "Wow, this is crazy. I've only ever flown first class before." Later, in 8th grade, I was at the same kid's house, an absolute mansion on top of a hill with the long landscaping entrance driveway, marbled floor entrance hall with stairs winding up either side, etc. And he and a girl, who had been dropped off in her dad's newer Ferrari, started having a discussion comparing the merits of their relatives' in-home movie theaters. Like, not just a living room with a cool AV setup, but full-on movie theaters with road seatings that could fit about 50 people. My family wasn't poor, but that was when I realized that we weren't rich either. I deliver pizzas in a very rich area. I'm talking seeing Rolls Royces and supercars on a daily basis kind of rich. My manager told me a story of someone that used to work there. This guy would deliver pizzas in a brand new BMW M3 and just put absolutely no effort into his job. Delivering pizzas isn't hard. Apparently this guy only had a job because his parents wouldn't pay his allowance if he didn't work. How much was his allowance, you ask? $5,000 a month. This guy was making $60,000 a year to deliver pizzas part-time. That's actually super common in wealthy families. An acquaintance of mine has the same deal with his parents. Work 40 hours a week and get $100,000 a year in allowance plus $15,000 a month for the mortgage being paid. Excuse me, $100,000 allowance? No wonder rich kids are out of touch. Brought my college roommate to my mom's house for Thanksgiving because he lived in a different state and I was only 15 minutes from campus. I gave him a quick tour of our house and he was astonished how clean it was. My mom's a neat freak and keeps a very clean house. He then said to my mom, "Wow, you guys must have a really good maid service." I've never seen my mom laugh that hard before. 2 girls, both nice and fairly level-headed, but also just raised too damn rich. One would take a taxi everywhere in town. It was a very safe small college town with the free campus buses, and she'd taxi across campus. She lived 2 blocks away from me and would take a taxi from her dorm to my house. Google Maps says it's a full 4-minute walk. She swore she had a terrible sense of direction and couldn't figure out where we lived. But you would think after that first embarrassingly short taxi ride, she'd throw on our address in Google Maps and just walk. The other would regularly complain about how not knowing how to manage their money. It took a while to figure out, but it eventually clicked that she meant very poor people didn't know how to invest their money in stocks and bonds. Then one day we were having a conversation where she revealed that she didn't think a house in Detroit in 2010 could possibly cost under $1 million. I told her I grew up in a nice $180K home and she thought I was dumb or lying. I shattered her world when I showed her my house on Zillow. When she graduated college, she complained about how much stuff cost all the time. It was nice seeing her learn the value of $1 finally. What do you think made the second girl finally come around? Was it just enough times of colliding with the real world? Her parents stopped paying her way after she got a job. She was probably making $70,000 to $80,000 in her first job, but she was living in Pasadena. She talked all the time about how poor she was and how she was living in an apartment above a garage. But at the time, I lived in an apartment with 5 other people and felt pretty wealthy, making $11 an hour. So I wasn't exactly heartbroken for her. Went to college with a totally chill dude who was apparently rich as freak. He was on our college golf team and enjoyed destroying a club if he hit a bad shot. He wasn't even angry, it was just like a reflex to go Bo Jackson over his knee or whatever. I asked him how he keeps playing and he basically said after every round he would just buy brand new clubs. He showed me in the trunk of his car that he had like 5 boxes of irons and always took the plastic off a new driver for every round. And he played every day at least 18 if not 36 holes. He said it wasn't even a rounding error in his dad's credit card. Jesus, I play golf and my golf clubs are really nice and custom fit to me, but that's because my dad is a PGA member and we get a sweet wholesale price. I can't imagine getting them replaced every day without it hurting. or even replacing them every year like some do. Kid in my high school crashed 6 cars within a year, and they weren't like 90s Toyotas and Hondas like most high schoolers have. These were brand new Subaru STIs, a BRZ, a BMW, brand new Jeep, stuff like that. The last car his dad bought him was a semi-new Ford Focus, a decent car, better than my 1997 white Camry. Every day he complained and threw a fit that his dad wouldn't buy him another $30,000+ car. Must be nice, I'm over here worrying about an oil leak on my car and the repair costs. I work with this guy. He recently proposed to a girl he dated for a few weeks with a $5,000 ring. He's 19 and we make less than $30,000 a year. They were married a month later. One of the kids in my grade bought bags of angel dust to senior prom. Not only did his parents let him go, the police did too. Now I believe he's in an engineering program at Yale. A kid that used to work for me came in work super pissed off one day. I asked him what was wrong, to which he replied, "My freaking maid didn't make my bed again, and my dad still won't fire her." I used to work for a family that had a cleaning lady every other day. None of the kids made their own beds, made their own food, washed their own dishes, hell, never even loaded a dishwasher. They just left them on the table for someone else to pick up. They had never done their own laundry either. When the son had football practice, I watched a teenage boy have a goddamn meltdown, sobbing and cursing about their maid for not throwing his uniform into the wash, and he didn't know how to do it himself. Their 2 oldest are about to have a very interesting freshman year in college. When I was in college, I roomed with a girl like this. Her mom did everything for her to the point where she couldn't function like a normal adult. Like her mom would drive 11 hours to clean this woman's room for her, clean up her used pee-pee wrappers, etc. Her mom would get really snarky with me like a self-reliance was a loser quality. Also because it made her daughter look bad. While it was really easy to learn to wash your own clothes, etc., she couldn't do it and just said, "Oh, well, I won't have to. When I graduate, I'm gonna get a high-paying job and have everything done for me. I wasn't raised to be a domestic like you." Fun fact, I wasn't raised that way. I did my own cooking and laundry because my mom couldn't bother to do anything but watch soap operas and Lifetime movies. Fast forward to present day, guess who couldn't hack taking care of herself after college and had to move back in with her mom? This was all of my college roommates. They couldn't do laundry, pick up after themselves, clean dishes, or make themselves a freaking sandwich. The ones whose parents lived close by, their mommies would come and clean up their room and do their laundry. Came back from a music festival in Southeast Asia, got VIP tickets. I swear, this isn't about me. One of the other festival goers is a 20-something-year-old Asian girl who looks like she's straight out of that movie Crazy Rich Asians. This chick had a photographer following her around snapping pictures or posing in front of the stage with various acts, getting in the way of other people trying to dance. She asked security if she could get them to clear a section for her so she could get an unobstructed view of the stage for better photos. She bought a couple of bottles, 6 in total, for her table and again had the photographer take incredible photos of her posing with the bottles. She was incredibly rude to the waitstaff, snapping her fingers and in general talking to them like they were lower class citizens. She asked my maid and I, both Westerners, to hang with her and her mates at her table, and again had the photographer take photos of her posing with us at the table. The other 2 guys from the group, both Asian, approached us when they saw that we were at this table, and it looked like we had made some new friends. When they approached us, the girl and her friends got quiet, spoke amongst themselves in Indonesian, and basically shooed them away. We went with them after they did that and walked over to our friends. One of the guys is Indonesian, and he told us that she basically told them to get lost and know their place. I can confirm that this definitely happens in Indonesia. I lived there for a number of years, and the racial and financial segregation is nothing like any other country or culture I know. I traveled there with a Filipino friend of mine. He looks Filipino and sounds and acts Aussie. He dresses very well. I dress very casually. In all of the stores we went into, if it wasn't apparent that we were traveling together, he would have the staff members follow him around. In one store, I was invited to try a $40,000 watch on. I let the staff members know I had no intention of making a purchase, but they insisted that I give it a try. He was told they do not allow people to try on watches. Interesting place. I know a girl who comes from a multi-million-dollar family. She's made several blog posts about how she and her significant other were broke, spent the year living really lavishly, and that they were going to end up on the street because there was no place to live available in their price range. And she genuinely wanted to end herself. Turns out what she meant is that there wasn't anywhere available above the normal rent rate. Ended up in a top floor penthouse. Guess daddy came through? Neither of them work. Man, this story just straight annoyed me. My boss bought her kids a $2 million house to live in while they went to college. My boss also paid for their college. So of course, they moved out of the $2 million house 5 months later because they wanted to be independent. Oh yeah, and expected mommy and daddy to pay for their rent, utilities, college, cars, vacations to see friends in different states, etc. I would just stay in the $2 million house. Maybe start a crayfish farm in the backyard to help pay for the house. Crayfish racers will pay a lot of money for a fast crawl, Dad. Crayfish racing reminds me of Filthy Frank. Friend in college literally went to the local GameStop at midnight every Tuesday. He'd buy every new release for every console. We went over to his house one time that year, and he had about 60-ish games that were unopened. One time we were walking around campus and he stopped by the ATM. He got his receipt and called his dad. Turns out his dad was worried his funds were running low, so he sent him $25,000 just to make sure he wasn't going to starve. Had a friend in high school whose dad wasn't involved. He was raised middle class like myself and lived with his mom and stepdad. After high school, he worked towards becoming an electrician and was saving for his first apartment. His dad eventually came around when he was right out of high school and started giving him money here and there when he needed it. His dad owned a large company on the East Coast and was a multi-millionaire. Soon his dad convinced him to quit his trade work and gave him a job at his business. Shortly after, he was promoted to a managerial position that he wasn't qualified for, and paid way too much. He'd just get wasted while on conference calls and nobody questioned him since he was the boss's son. His dad bought him his first home, almost $500,000, and multiple cars. He took up horse racing and we quickly had nothing in common. Gone were the days of dumb teenage stuff, going fishing, hiking, playing video games together. He quickly found a girlfriend whose dad was also a multimillionaire. She was 30 and still putting everything on daddy's credit card. I couldn't keep up with their lifestyle and very quickly we faded as friends. After his girlfriend and him broke up, she told me that he was actually severely depressed and almost drove his car off a bridge multiple times. Deep down, he was having issues with wanting to live up to his dad's lifestyle and standards, but losing his old friends in life. It's too bad. I haven't seen him in probably 4 years now. We tried to reconnect a few times, but it just doesn't work anymore. Man, that's really sad. It's like his dad wanted to make up for the neglect with money. It's stories like these that tell you that money corrupts people. It's like all those YouTubers that got famous when they were really young, and a lot of them have just disappeared now, because they're probably broke.
To anyone who has ordered a mail order bride, what was it like and what happened? My friend Richard has a mail order bride from the Philippines. He's a scruffy redneck long-haul trucker from West Virginia. She's tiny, slender, and 10 years his junior. At first, she cooked, cleaned, and kept his bed warm, but after a few years, she told him she wanted an education. He put in a ton of overtime and saved up enough to put her through college. She's a physician's assistant now and makes more money than he ever has, but she still makes him dinner and makes a point of always being waiting at the door when he gets back from a long haul. They've been together for 20 years now, and it's a joy to see them together. So on paper, I don't really like the idea of mail-order bride stuff. I don't really like the idea of any opening of a market that relies solely on a specific demographic, like women and stuff like that. Take the thing with surrogacy nowadays, where like a woman will have a baby for someone else to have a child, and I believe someone proposed that women in vegetative states should be used to be a repository for other people's children, and that just sounds like some horrible dystopian world. But I digress. This actually sounds like a nice, mutually beneficial relationship. He paid for her to come to the country and everything. He gives her a place to stay. He works, she cooks, she cleans. And then she said, I want an education. And he respects her enough that he's like, yes, I will pay for you to have an education. You can do what you want. That just sounds nice, not gonna lie. This doesn't sound bad at all. But I am 100% certain that things are gonna get messed up as I read through these stories.
One of my uncles, who is Filipino, convinced one of his white co-workers to marry his 28-year-old niece, who was still living in the Philippines at the time. The guy was at least 20 years older than her. The relationship was really rocky the first 2 years. She hated him, basically, but she stuck with the relationship, got him to go to church, and they were more or less together. About 10 years into the marriage, the guy needed a kidney transplant. Months pass, he can't work anymore, and she's spending all her free time outside of working taking care of him at the hospital while he's waiting for a kidney. I visited one time while she was in the hospital, and she broke down telling my other relatives and me how she loved him and she didn't want to lose him. The doctors finally give him less than 3 months to live if he doesn't get a kidney, and after a month and a half later, he got the kidney, recovered, and went back to work within a year's time. At a family get-together, he bragged to everyone, including me, about how amazing he feels and how much he thought he was dead and that he was blessed to have a new lease on life. Then, a few months later, I get a call from him saying that he's met someone online and he still considers me family. In shock, I tell him I'm busy and then called my aunt, who then explained to me he found a 21-year-old single Filipina mom from Cebu and already filed divorce papers against my uncle's niece, who was almost 40 at the time. I'm weirdly reminded of Captain Hook in the classic The Good Peter Pan by Disney, where he's,
Oh, Smee, the way of a man with a maid, taking the best years of her life and then casting her aside
Like an old glove. I went to a college course and one of the other students was a pretty obvious mail-order bride. She was Thai, and the more we got to know her, the more she shared about the relationship. She was late 20s and he was at the lower end of 60. He didn't work, but he received some big work compensation payouts and was apparently quite wealthy because of that. She told us they met online on one of those meet Thai ladies who were just dying to be your girlfriend kind of sites, and after talking for all of 2 weeks, they agreed to marry. This country is a little bit stricter about those sorts of unions, so there were some hoops they had to jump through, such as he had to go to visit her for a certain amount of time in Thailand before starting the process. But essentially, they were engaged after a few weeks and married within a few months. The guy essentially wanted one of those stereotypical Asian marriages where the wife was subservient and existed to please their husband. She would tell us he would make her wait till he was done to eat, and he would only let her eat ladylike foods like salad. He paid her a monthly salary, which was pretty abysmal, and she had to use that for clothing and other essentials. He also wouldn't let her go anywhere by herself and would drop her off and turn up an hour before classes ended in case we got let out early to drive her home. I remember we had to do a group assessment, and I had given her my phone number and he forced her to delete it. I'm a female. I think the saddest part was when she asked a bunch of us if we could get birth control pills for her because her husband kept destroying her script/pills, and you could tell she was absolutely terrified of getting pregnant. The weird thing, though, was that she wasn't terribly bad off in Thailand. Her family was apparently quite wealthy, and she had her own home and stuff over there, but for whatever reason, she didn't want to live there. Personally, I would have ran the second I saw that purple-faced blob of a husband.
See, this is the situation I normally expect to come from this, but I'm not going to be surprised when, it's the other way around.
My dad had one a few years back. He met her online and flew out to get her after a while. She was shut in and was legitimately afraid of me because she thought I was smoking pot. Funny thing was that I had never smoked pot at the time. I was 17. It was a weird dynamic. If I was home, she stayed in her room, unless I'd been in my room for an extended period and she deemed it safe to get food from the kitchen. My room was in the basement, just for clarification. The few times we crossed paths, she would see me, gasp, and then run to her room. My dad never saw this as a problem. He basically catered to her every want and need. Also, I should mention, he was 56 and she was 29. A year later, I moved out. Since then, she has attacked him on 2 occasions and had him arrested. Eventually, he sent her back, or maybe she left. I don't know. I no longer speak to my father, so that's the extent of my knowledge.
I agree with this too. That is such a weird dynamic to have with an individual that lives in your home, man. Imagine that, you walk through the hall. Oh, hey, lady who is presumably banging my parental figure. How are you? Ah! Runs into a frickin' room.
Although my parents were always too ashamed to admit this to anyone but myself and my sister, my mom was a mail-order bride about 23 to 24 years ago. This was before all of the online companies that do this, so my father had to find my mother in a sort of magazine catalog of Filipino women. He sent her letters and she replied. Over the course of a year, they finally met and my mom moved to my dad's tiny hometown. They got married and they had 2 daughters together, one being myself. They were both looking for a better life and someone who would treat them better than past partners had, and they both got that. Plus, it turns out they both have the travel bug, so now they're retired, living a nomadic life traveling the globe, and they got more than they've ever hoped for. Sure, I've always known there were some serious cultural differences between my parents that they've never been able to fully reconcile with. My mom, being from a very traditional village in northern Philippines, had a hard time understanding a lot of North American norms and beliefs, and they butt heads over a lot of small things. These cultural clashes have taught me so much though, and their collective love and travel and culture has inspired me to study anthropology and travel around the globe. I can't imagine having lived in a home where we didn't eat bacon, rice, pancit, and steak, or purple ube birthday cakes on a regular basis. TLDR, my mom was a mail-order bride resulting in a long-term happy marriage between my parents and purple birthday cake for me.
Purple birthday cake sounds pretty rad, and I gotta say, out of all the ways you can get a mail-order bride, the fact that this guy had to do it without the use of the internet or something is, in a way, only in a way, a little bit respectable. Like the fact that he had to send actual letters and then wait for those letters to be delivered and then wait for a reply back, and I don't know, the patience this man must have had. I know a guy who married a Russian gal, supposedly not quite mail order, but someone he'd known online for years and spent time with several times over the years. He had learned Russian fairly fluently as well. Her actually gaining citizenship required a number of interviews over something like 2 to 3 years to establish legitimacy and so on. During the very last interview, where she would have finally been rubber stamped in, she admitted to cheating on him. During the interview, deal over. He withdrew support from her and told her to take a hike. Last he heard, she had fled the state before immigration could deport her and now was just another illegal immigrant in the U.S. Strange thing was she had a young kid, not his, that would have definitely been born during the time they were supposedly involved long distance. Sounds like he should have seen this coming. He was definitely heartbroken about the kid though, treated him like his own anyway. All she had to do was shut up for just 1 more hour, let the paperwork get finished, then ditch him and she'd have gotten off completely free and legal. Man, why would she do that? The land of milk and honey is right there before you, Russian lady, and you just threw it all away by admitting it. I mean, maybe on some level the guilt was there? I don't know. I'm curious why she gave up the ghost.
I used to work retail with a Filipino woman who was a mail-order bride. She was a tiny little thing around 35 years old, and her husband was a very large, stocky white man around 50 to 55. I thought it was very weird when she first told me, but when I met him and saw them together, it actually seemed like a nice fit. He was always coming into the store to bring her lunch or to buy her things and pick her up from work on his motor scooter. It was pretty cute watching them ride it together. It seemed like he really enjoyed spoiling her, and when she talked about him, she seemed very much in love with him. It didn't appear that he was particularly wealthy or anything, but he treated her very well and they seemed very happy. Just before I left that shop, she had just became pregnant with their first child.
I guess it's one of those things. Who would I be to judge someone for how they meet the woman that they love if they're genuinely happy together? I mean, I think one of the most popular ways to meet women nowadays is Tinder, which is kind of depressing, but I guess that's the way things are with people being less and less sociable nowadays.
I have been married to what some might call a mail-order bride for almost a year now, but first let me correct a few common misconceptions about how it works now. In the USA, at least. First, you can no longer just get a catalog and pick a woman out of it and pay to have her sent to you. 20 plus years ago, maybe, but not anymore. In order for her to get a K-1 fiancé visa, you must have met her in person at least once and provided substantial evidence of a meaningful relationship, such as pictures with both of you, email, phone, chat logs, or other documents such as travel records showing you were both in the same place at the same time. You can apply for an exception to this on cultural grounds if both you and her are part of cultures that regularly practice arranged marriages. Second, she still has to go through all of the procedures involved in getting a permanent immigration visa. That means background checks, medical checks, which can usually only be performed at a very short list of places who naturally charge a lot. Tons of documents from both parties and an interview in person at her country's U.S. embassy, or sometimes at a consulate, which might be a really long way for her to go if she doesn't live in her country's capital city. Third, if you meet her through a service legally known as an international marriage broker or IMB, designed specifically to match Americans with foreigners looking to marry and immigrate, you have to get a background check done on yourself, and that information is then given to her as soon as you start talking. This information includes things such as your criminal record, especially any history of domestic violence, your marital and family history, number of previous wives, divorcees, number of children, and personal information, age, full name, legal name, etc. All that said, I went on a tour of Thailand as a combination vacation and to meet some of the women on one of these sites. I was 34 at the time, and the next youngest man who was there at the same time as me was 48. And I'm pretty sure all of them, 8 others, had been married before at least once. As for the women, some just seemed like they wanted money or free food and drinks. Others seemed like they just found foreigners more attractive but had no interest in leaving their country. And very, very few seemed like they might be honestly interested in me and in moving to America eventually. Most of them I couldn't even have a conversation with since they didn't speak enough English. I consider myself lucky to have found the woman who I ended up marrying, since she was both one of the honest ones and she had a university degree in English. I kept in touch with her daily over internet chat and video chat, and I flew back to see her 3 additional times before the 5th and final time when I flew over there with my family and she flew back with us. We had a traditional Thai engagement ceremony while my family was there, and we had a small courthouse wedding a month after we got back to America. Our first anniversary is next month, and right now she's going to an American community college to try for an associate's degree here while cooking me delicious Thai food all the time. So I'd say it's going great so far. We've had a few arguments and fights, like I assume most newlywed married couples do, especially ones that didn't live together before marriage. But I'd do it all again in a heartbeat.
See, that's the interesting part about reading all these Reddit stories and everything. It's interesting to learn about these processes. Like, obviously, this has its upsides, its downsides, and whatnot. I guess good for the guy. He's celebrating his first wedding anniversary. Like I said, I'm just a bit mixed on, like, the whole, like, morality of mail order brides, I guess. But quite a few of these seem to have worked out quite well. My sister's father has a mail-order bride from China. She was a divorcee with a 17-year-old son. I only got to meet her once, but she was really nice and cooked the most amazing food. Last year, my sister's dad finally started taking Chinese language classes as a surprise and found out that her cute nickname for him was Fat American. Don't even ask me the logic of, like, why I pick the voices I do for these stories, because there's no logic to it. I just come out with one and then I dedicate myself to it. It's pretty much just for the sake of variation. My uncle is married to a wonderful Filipino mail-order bride. He's a socially awkward aspie. She's warm, gregarious, and funny. They've been together probably 18 years and have a great, well-adjusted kid. As a teen, I thought it was such a weird relationship. I imagined for her that it was very shallow and lacking in fulfillment. Now I can see that they both get a better life. Her financial situation improved as well as that of her family back home. She has a beautiful child and she married into a pretty nice family. For my uncle's part, he has a wife and daughter who care about him and help him navigate the world. I adore her mostly because she was good to my grandmother, Uncle's mom, and she visited her all the time, called her mom, made sure her daughter, she's my cousin even though she's younger than my own kids, had a solid relationship with grandma. All in all, I think my uncle seriously lucked out meeting such a great bride. To be perfectly frank, there have been too many positive ones that I'm not even thinking about the main topic right now. I'm honing in on they were my cousin even though they're younger than my own kids. So does anyone remember Johnny Capahara? And it was like 2 movies about a Hawaiian guy who moves to like Aspen or something. It's somewhere with snow and all that, and he learns to snowboard rather than surf. But then in the sequel film, he goes back to Hawaii, I think, and he meets up with his grandfather who has had like an illegitimate child with someone. So that makes this young boy Johnny Capahara's uncle, and he like holds it over and like, I'm your uncle, you should listen to me, even though he's like 10 years old and Johnny is like 17 or some crap. I don't know. That's all I'm thinking about right now.
I used to play Magic at a game store where the owner often went to Thailand to star in she-male smut. He was very open about it and would tell you about it and show you the DVDs if you asked. Anyway, on one of his trips, he decided to bring home a bride. She was a very nice younger woman. They lived in his store. He converted the back room of his comic store into a studio apartment, and she basically stayed in that back room all the time. He would occasionally yell at her to make him food, and that was generally the only time we would see her. She stayed with him just long enough to get citizenship and then bailed on him.
Ungrateful wet.
No, that's good for her, to be honest. This guy sounds like a pig. What I'm more curious about is if he had a penchant for, the best of both worlds, I guess you could put it. Well, what was she packing? My neighbor growing up had a mail-order bride from either Russia or Ukraine. They had a son, and he was a butthole. We had a bonfire one night, and he decided to surprise me and everyone else around by throwing batteries into the fire. Messed everything up. Came home from a half day at school one day to see cop cars in front of the house. Turns out that the father was beating the wife and graping minus the G the son. That's why he was always kind of messed up. I was waiting for a messed up one like that. Am I happy that I found it? Not particularly. Hope that guy's rotting in jail.
Okay, this gets a little crazy. Everybody knew my neighbor was gay. It was a fact and never questioned. Let's call him Terry. Terry was about 45 and lived alone in his inherited mother's house. That was 4 doors down from us. He kept himself to himself and seemed pleasant. One day, we were surprised to see a Taiwanese woman about half his age had moved in. Let's call her June. June didn't speak much English and loved gardening. Over the next few months, our neighbor's house was slowly transformed into a mini botanical garden with a small fountain, new fences, and the start of a new driveway. One day, out of the blue, I heard a loud bang at my mother's front door. I was about 17 at the time, visiting from college. I opened the door to find June stood on the pavement throwing poo at my mother's windows. Yes, actual poo. I shouted at her, "What are you doing, madam?" To which she ignored me and stormed back to her house. Now, this was back in early 2003, so after telling my mother what had happened, we took the good old British route of cleaning it up and not causing trouble. The poo was hard and not an issue to remove from the window frames, front lawn, and fence. We thought that was it and laughed it off. Big mistake. The next time I visited my mother, I noticed that there was more poo on my mother's front lawn and the lawn of our elderly next-door neighbor. Confused but incensed, I stormed round to Terry's house with my bag still in hand and banged loudly on the front door. Terry answered with a surprised look on his face, shaking. I shouted at him, "Tell your wife to stop throwing poo at my mother's house, you weirdo," and marched back home. A few days passed and my mum was pleased to report no issue. My outburst had worked. The next-door neighbors sent me a box of chocolates as a thank you, and we celebrated with a barbecue. It was during that barbecue that the neighbor mentioned her cat had gone missing. My mother also had cats, who often roamed for a few days but always came home for dinner. We assured her he would be back and not to worry. A few days passed and we realized one of my mother's cats was also absent. Then 2 and 3, along with the neighbors. It suddenly dawned on all of us that the poo June was throwing at the house was cat poo from her garden. We have put up flyers, etc., but haven't seen the cats since. Meanwhile, Terry and June's new driveway looks lovely.
Okay, all circumstantial evidence points to her absolutely abducting or killing those cats, but, you can't just, make accusations like that. But I have to say, if my dog went missing or something, I have a dog, and, I had an inkling that the new neighbor 4 doors down or something took it, well, I would cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war.
I know several guys who had mail-order brides. All were military or ex-military. That's why so many mail-order brides were from places where there were U.S. bases, like the Philippines. One guy, ex-Navy, brought over a Filipino wife. He seemed to love her, but she did not adapt well. She would never answer the phone if he was not home, even though he explained it was him calling her. She wouldn't drive his car and a bunch of other things like that. She seemed nice, but was lonely, so he brought over her sister, and things really changed. We used to travel for weeks for work, and one time when we got back, the wife and sister were gone. Killed him, and he never saw it coming. That was years ago, and I never heard what happened.
Absolutely not surprised. But, okay, so I've actually been saving this, so here's the thing. I also know a guy, not technically a mail-order bride, but he did have a wife that he brought over from Thailand. And he's actually done this a few times. I think he's gone through 3 different women. And he's a nice guy. He's actually just had some unfortunate luck, or I believe one left him. One died, sadly, and currently he's very happy with another woman. Anyway, I'm in my late teens, and I'm going to work with him because the guy I usually worked with wasn't available. So he picks me up from my house, and I'm like, hey, why do you have this little Buddha statue on your dashboard? Are you, like, Buddhist? He's like, oh, no, my wife, she's Taiwanese, and she is Buddhist. And I look at him, and I say, oh, so does she not believe in, like, physical or worldly possessions or anything like that? Is she very spiritual and stuff? And he, like, stops for a minute and looks off while he's, like, you know, like, staring down the road as he's driving and everything. He turns to me for a quick second and goes, yeah, she's not Buddhist. He knows this because she is a really hard gambler and apparently quite the money grubber, but that was long ago. And again, I'll say this, no foul play in his life or relationships or anything. He's very happy now, which I am glad he is because he's a nice guy.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.